The desert's endless silence. The desert was not merely a place of sand and stone. It was a living ocean of silence, stretching farther than any eye could see. By day, its dunes shimmered like molten gold beneath the merciless sun. By night, the sands cooled into silver waves beneath a ceiling of stars so thick, so bright, that the heavens seemed almost too close to bear. Travelers who dared to cross it spoke of its moods as if the desert itself were alive, sometimes cruel, sometimes merciful, always ancient. The winds carved its dunes into shapes that looked like sleeping giants, coiled serpents, or towers that reached for the moon. And in that silence, stories were born, stories that echoed for centuries. But among all the desert's tales, none was whispered more carefully than the story of the secret train. The first whispers, the elders told it best. Sitting outside their clay homes, under the thin shadows of desert palms, children would gather at their feet, eyes wide, as the old ones leaned close, their voices dropping lower, as though the sands themselves might overhear. "There is a train," they would begin, their voices graveled by age and dust. "A train that does not belong to this world. It rides not upon iron tracks, but upon the breath of the desert itself." Some say it was built in forgotten centuries, when men thought they could tame the sands. Others say it was never built at all, that it was born, like the dunes, from the desert's own dream. The children would shiver, though the night was warm. They would glance toward the horizon, where the dunes swelled like waves in the moonlight. "The train comes only under the silver moon," the elders continued. "It whistles without steam, its light glows without fire. And should you hear its call, should you see its shadow, beware. For those who step aboard never return." The vanishing the story was not only myth. There were names, whispered still by families who lived on the desert's edge. There was Jamil, a shepherd's son, who vanished one summer's night when he followed a whistle he claimed to have heard in the dunes. His sandals were found the next morning, half buried in the sand. But the boy himself was never seen again. There was a merchant caravan that went astray 100 years ago. Survivors who staggered back told of a glowing train that had appeared before them, as real as stone, as shining as silver. Half their company climbed aboard, weary and half mad with thirst. The rest blinked and the train was gone, taking their companions with it. And there was, too, the story of the soldier. His journal was found decades later, pages worn but legible, describing nights when he heard the haunting hum of iron wheels across the dunes. His final entry spoke of boarding at last. No body was ever found. The desert swallowed them all, and the whispers of the train grew stronger. The pull of curiosity it was, said the train appeared only once in a generation, always in a different place. Perhaps it was not one train at all, but many, a fleet of phantoms. Perhaps it was one, endlessly circling, searching for souls lost to the sands. But despite the warnings, curiosity burned brighter than fear in some hearts. Scholars, wanderers, mystics, even thieves, many had set out to find it. Few returned, and those who did spoke little, their eyes dark with memories they would not share. This was the story that drew a certain group together, wanderers bound not by kinship, but by the lure of the unknown. Each carried their own reason for seeking the phantom tracks. Each bore their own secrets, their own thirst for answers. And so, one summer night when the moon was nearly full and the desert wind carried a strange hum, they gathered at the village edge, staring into the dunes as if they could already hear the faint echo of a whistle. The guide at their head stood Alim, a guide whose beard was silvered by years, whose eyes had seen more deserts than most men could imagine. His staff was carved from desert cedar, smooth from decades of touch. Some said he had once seen the train himself, long ago, but turned away. He spoke little of it. His only words, when asked, were, "The desert gives, the desert takes. The train, it is both." Beside him was Layla, a scholar from the northern libraries, her satchel filled with books and scrolls, her ink-stained fingers trembling with eagerness. She sought truth, for her people dismissed the tale as superstition, but her heart told her it was more. Behind them trailed Youssef, a merchant whose fortunes had crumbled. He carried more debts than coins, but swore the train was no ghost, that it carried riches beyond imagining. And there was also a young boy, Karim, no older than 12, who had slipped from his home to follow the group. His grandfather had vanished on the train, and the boy carried a faded scarf of the man's, determined to learn the truth of his fate. There were others too, pilgrims, wanderers, men and women drawn by curiosity or desperation, but all of them, knowingly or not, stepped into the desert seeking the same thing, the whisper of the secret train. The Dapofta village lights faded behind them as they crossed into the dunes. The stars blazed above, sharp and countless. The sand, still warm from the day's heat, cooled slowly beneath their feet. The wind whispered across the dunes, carrying sounds that might have been voices, or perhaps it was only the desert breathing. They carried water, dates, blankets, but none knew how far they would walk or how long they would search. The desert was vast, and the train appeared only to those who listened carefully. Yet, even as they began their journey, each one felt it, a weight in the air, a hum beneath the sand, as though something enormous was waiting, watching, biding its time. The desert was endless, yes, but somewhere within it, the tracks of the secret train waited to be found, and with each step, they drew closer to a story older than memory, older than the dunes themselves. Into the heart of the dunes, the desert was a strange teacher. It tested patience, punished pride, and rewarded silence. Those who walked it quickly learned to measure time not by hours, but by shadows, not by clocks, but by the aching rhythm of their own footsteps. Alim led them with a calm certainty, his staff sinking lightly into the sand as if he had walked these paths 1,000 times. He never glanced at a map, never looked behind, yet somehow he always knew where to set his feet. "Do you hear it?" he asked at last, his voice low, carried off by the wind. Layla glanced up. "Hear what?" "The desert," he said. "It hums." At first, the others heard nothing but their own breathing, the shuffle of sand beneath their sandals, but as silence stretched, a faint vibration reached their ears, a distant, low resonance, as though something vast moved far beneath the earth. Karim, the boy, clutched his grandfather's scarf tighter. His heart leaped. He had heard that hum before, on nights when he could not sleep, when he swore the air outside his window trembled faintly. He had thought it imagination, but here, out in the open desert, the hum was undeniable. The first night when night fell fully, they made camp in the lee of a dune. The fire crackled weakly. Dry wood was scarce, but the flame was enough to ward off the worst of the chill. The stars stretched so close overhead, they seemed like lanterns hung just out of reach. Layla pulled a book from her satchel and scribbled, by firelight, her words sharp and urgent. Yusuf, the merchant, grumbled as he chewed a date. "We wander aimlessly. You follow the word of old men and ghost tales. I begin to think the only thing waiting in this desert is death." Alim said nothing, only gazed at the stars, but Karim leaned forward. "My grandfather heard it," he said, his young voice steady. "He heard the whistle. He saw the light. He wasn't lying. And I'll find him. I know I will." Yusuf snorted, but he did not argue further. The boy's conviction was sharper than any blade. As the fire dwindled, they laid their blankets across the sand. One by one, sleep took them, but in the quiet hours, as the moon reached its highest point, a faint sound drifted across the dunes, a whistle, distant, thin, stretched by the wind but unmistakable. Several of them stirred, eyes wide in the darkness. Layla's hand froze above her journal. Karim sat bolt upright, clutching his scarf, but when they looked to Alim, the guide was already awake, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He had heard it too. "It begins," he whispered. "Tracks in the sand." The next morning, they set out earlier than ever, before the first streaks of dawn had colored the sky. The whistle still haunted their minds, each convinced it had been real, none willing to dismiss it as a dream. By midday, the sands grew harsher. Heat shimmered, twisting the horizon like liquid glass. The air smelled faintly metallic, a temp that did not belong in the desert. And then Karim stopped suddenly, pointing down. "Look." At first it seemed like nothing more than the usual ridges of wind-shaped sand, but as the group gathered, their eyes adjusted and the shape became clear. A line. No, not one line, two, running parallel, smooth and straight, cutting across the dunes for several yards before vanishing beneath drifting sand. Tracks. Their breath caught collectively. Layla knelt, brushing sand aside with trembling hands. The lines deepened, grooves, not natural ridges. The faint gleam of something metallic flickered beneath her fingertips. "Steel," she whispered, "buried steel." The desert wind howled, rushing across the dune as though it meant to erase the discovery at once. Sand poured back into the grooves, swallowing the tracks inch by inch. Yusuf's eyes gleamed with greedy triumph. "There, proof enough." Not a ghost, but a machine. And machines can be found, bargained with, tamed. Do you see? This is no legend. But Olam's face was grave. He planted his staff into the sand and shook his head. Tracks that appear and vanish, he said softly. This is not the work of men. This is the desert showing us a glimpse, nothing more. The distant light that night, they made camp again, though few could sleep. Karim kept staring toward the horizon, whispering to himself. Layla scribbled furiously, ink staining her fingers. Yusef paced, muttering of riches. The desert was unusually still. Even the wind had hushed, as though waiting. Then, just past midnight, it came again, a whistle longer, louder this time. The sound did not echo like metal or steam, but like a voice carried through centuries, mournful and strange, and then, faint but undeniable. A light shimmered on the horizon. It was not the flicker of fire, nor the steady glow of stars. It pulsed, white and cold, as though a lantern swung back and forth far away. The caravan rose to their feet, hearts hammering. The train, Karim breathed. His eyes shone with a mixture of terror and awe. It's real. The pull of the unknown. They stood in silence, each caught between fear and longing. Yusef's fists tightened. We must follow it tonight. No, Alim said sharply. The desert deceives. What glimmers in darkness may not wait for us in dawn. But already, Karim had taken a step forward, his scarf whipping in the wind. Layla too stared at the light with desperate hunger. It seemed to pulse faster, as though beckoning them, and for the first time, even Alim's composure wavered. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened, because deep in his heart, though he had long resisted it, he too felt the pull of the secret train. Following the lantern in the horizon, the group could not rest after seeing the light. The small fire they had kindled felt pitiful, fragile, almost insulting compared to that pale glow in the distance. It will fade if we wait, Yusef insisted, his voice trembling between greed and fear. We must go. Alim's hand pressed firmly on his staff. The desert deceives at night. Many men have chased mirages only to vanish before dawn. Yet even as he spoke, the light pulsed again, brighter, steady, rhythmic. Not like fire, not like stars. It swung back and forth, as if carried on invisible rails. Layla pressed her hands to her chest. No mirage does that. It moves as though a lantern swings from the front of a train. The boy Karim could bear no more. He darted forward several steps before Alim's sharp voice cut him short. Stay close, the guide commanded. If we go together. And so, against his own instincts, Alim turned, raised his staff, and began walking toward the faint light. The desert swallowed their footsteps. The dunes stretched endlessly, silver under the moon. The only sound, the soft shuffle of sandals in sand, and all the while, the light gleamed, drawing them onward like a star that refused to stay still. Whispers in the windows passed. The glow remained always on the horizon, never closer, never farther. Yet the desert itself changed. The wind carried sounds, faint rattles, clicks, like iron brushing against iron. Layla froze at one point, clutching Yusef's arm. Do you hear it? She whispered. They listened. Yes, faint, almost imperceptible, a rhythm beneath the wind, a cadence like wheels on distant rails. Karim's eyes widened with wonder. It's real, he said again, almost breathless. The others said nothing. Each felt the truth hammering at their ribs, though none dared speak it. Then the voices began. At first, soft, just sighs that might have been wind through dunes, but soon, more distinct. A woman's laughter, a man's muttered prayer. The cry of a child. Alim stopped in his tracks, his knuckles white around his staff. Do not answer them, he warned. Karim frowned. But they sound. Do not answer them. Alim snapped, his voice sharper than ever. The voices faded, as though displeased by being ignored. The wind fell silent once more. Only the pulse of the mysterious light remained. Buried relics near dawn. They stumbled upon something half buried in the sand. It was metal, rusted, ancient, its edges jagged. Layla knelt eagerly, brushing sand aside. Soon a shape revealed itself. A broken lantern, its glass cracked, its frame bent. Strange symbols, long eroded, clung faintly to its rim. Yusef grunted, prying it free. See, proof, an ordinary lantern, nothing more. This is the remnant of a caravan, not some ghostly train. But Alim's eyes were grim. No caravan builds lanterns like this. The design was foreign, curved in ways none of them recognized. and though rusted, the lantern felt unnaturally cold in Layla's hands, as if it had been buried not in sand, but in snow. They left it behind, unsettled. The light in the horizon still gleamed, unchanged, as though mocking their confusion. The mirage of Trax's dawn painted the dunes in orange and gold. Kareem gasped and pointed again. Ahead of them, faint but clear, twin lines gleamed across the sand. Tracks. But unlike before, these were not broken or buried. They stretched on and on, vanishing into the horizon, perfectly parallel, perfectly smoothed out. The group hurried forward, their exhaustion forgotten. Layla knelt, touching the cold steel. Her heart raced. "It's real," she whispered. "It's real." Yusuf laughed, a wild, triumphant sound. "Do you see? Riches, treasures, this is no dream." Alim, however, frowned. The tracks gleamed too brightly in the morning sun, and when he pressed his staff against them, no shadow fell. The tracks did not exist in this world. They shimmered, between presence and absence, a mirage of metal and memory. Kareem walked along them, eyes wide, holding his grandfather's scarf tight. He whispered, "He walked here." "I know he did." The desert wind moaned, carrying the faintest whistle. The decision at last. They gathered on the dunes, staring down at the tracks that glowed without belonging. The sun climbed higher, burning away the cool night. The horizon shimmered with heat, yet the mysterious light that had guided them all night was gone. Only the tracks remained. "What now?" Layla asked, her voice tight with fatigue and wonder. Yusuf raised his arms. "We follow them. Wherever they lead, there we will find the train, and all that it carries." Alem's face was unreadable. His gaze swept the desert as if expecting the sands to rise against them. Finally, he spoke. "The desert has shown us its shadow. The tracks are not here to guide us. They are here to test us." But Kareem shook his head fiercely. "No, they are real, and they will lead to the truth. I will follow them, with or without you." Silence fell. The group exchanged glances, their choice unspoken but inevitable. One by one, they nodded. They would follow the phantom tracks. And thus began the true journey, not into dunes alone, but into the mystery of the secret train that rode the desert's breath. The march along the tracks, the phantom tracks, stretched into infinity, their surface gleaming like steel yet throwing no shadow in the morning light. The group walked in silence, each footstep sinking softly into the sand beside them. Layla scribbled frantically into her journal as she walked, her ink staining the corners of her hands. They vanish, they appear. Perhaps they only exist when seen. Perhaps the train carries the memory of rails wherever it goes. Alim's brows furrowed. Or perhaps the desert lets us see only what it chooses. The boy Kareem kept his eyes locked forward, clutching the faded scarf of his grandfather. His lips moved with whispered words, though no one heard them clearly. The sun climbed higher. Heat rolled across the sand like waves from an unseen fire. Yusuf cursed under his breath, tugging at his robes, wiping sweat from his brow. "If this train is not real," he muttered, "then may the desert bury me. No ghost torments men this way. It is close. I can feel it." And indeed, all of them could feel it. The air itself thrummed faintly, as if vibrating with some faraway machinery, signs of the past around noon. The tracks led them into a hollow between two vast dunes. The sand there was strangely darker, scattered with bits of metal and wood half buried in the grains. Layla knelt, brushing the sand away. Her fingers uncovered a twisted fragment of wood, painted faintly with peeling red. Further along, Alim unearthed a rusted piece of iron. A wheel spoke, perhaps, or part of an axle. Kareem picked up a shard of glass, its edges smoothed by sand. He held it up, and for a moment it seemed to catch light not from the sun, but from something deeper. "Within this is it," Layla whispered, "proof beyond doubt. Once, there was something here. Once, the train stopped." But Alim shook his head, his expression grim. "Or perhaps this is what the desert wants us to believe." The relics lay silent, heavy with mystery. None dared linger too long. They pressed onward, following the phantom rails, the dunes that moved by evening. The air cooled, though the sands still burned faintly underfoot. The tracks curved suddenly to the left, winding between dunes that towered higher than buildings. And as they walked, the dunes seemed to shift, slowly but undeniably. Layla froze, her hand clutching her satchel. "Did you see that?" The others turned. One dune had changed shape in the span of a heartbeat. Its crest had slid downward like a wave collapsing into foam. Kareem gasped, They're moving like water. Indeed, the dunes moved with eerie grace, as if breathing, their ridges folded, their peaks slumped, their shadows twisted unnaturally. The tracks ran straight through, yet the desert itself seemed intent on burying them alive. Alim raised his staff. Stay close. Do not stray from the rails. No matter what you see, the group pressed forward, their hearts pounding as the dunes rose and fell around them like giant beasts. The tracks, however unreal, remained steady beneath their gaze, a narrow lifeline through a shifting sea. The second whistle, as the last light of day bled into dusk, the sound returned. A whistle, not faint this time, not distant. It cut through the desert air sharp and clear, filling their chests with vibration. Kareem cried out, his voice breaking. That's it, that's it. The others stopped, stunned. The whistle echoed again, mournful, stretching long into the night. And then came another sound, a low, steady rumble, like thunder rolling underground. The sand trembled beneath their feet. Layla's journal slipped from her hands. Is it coming? She whispered. The train. It's coming. Yusuf laughed wildly, raising his arms as though to greet it. Do you hear that? Gold jewels, fortunes beyond counting. The train comes for us. But Alam's face turned pale. His grip on his staff tightened. No, it does not come for us. It comes because it must. The shadow on the horizon darkness deepened quickly. Stars blinked awake, spreading across the sky like spilled silver. The dunes stretched endlessly in every direction, their shifting shapes momentarily still. And then they saw it. On the horizon, black against the twilight, a shadow moved, long, rectangular, impossibly vast. Lanterns flickered faintly along its sides, glowing with cold light. Like moons trapped in glass, it glided silently across the sand, its wheels unseen, its rails invisible. Yet the sound of its movement shook the ground, the rhythmic thunder of iron on iron, the secret train. The group froze in awe, their breaths stolen. Karim's eyes filled with tears. Layla's lips parted soundlessly, her body trembling. Yusef's laughter choked in his throat, replaced by gasps. Alim whispered a prayer beneath his breath, his voice too soft to hear. The train of legend, the phantom of the desert, the secret that had haunted generations, and it was real. The choice of fear and wonder. The train slowed as it neared. Its lanterns glowed brighter, casting long, pale beams across the dunes. Its shape grew clearer, carriages of polished wood and brass, though cracked and weathered with centuries. Windows gleamed with dim light, and behind them, shadows, figures sitting, unmoving, watching. The whistle shrieked once more, long and mournful, tearing through the night sky. The group clutched their ears, their hearts pounding. The train stopped. Before them, doors slid open with a hiss of air that smelled of rust and smoke. Silence followed, an invitation. The group stood trembling, each one caught between terror and fascination. The desert was silent, the stars burning above. The only path forward lay through those open doors. Closing of Chunk One. Alim looked at them, his face grave, his eyes deep as the desert. You have sought it, he said softly. Now it has found you. The boy Kareem took a step forward, his scarf whipping in the wind. Layla clutched her satchel to her chest, her body leaning toward the train. Yusef's eyes gleamed with hunger, his feet already moving. The choice lay before them, the secret train, waiting, silent, eternal. And with that, the whispers of the desert fell away, leaving only the sound of the waiting doors. The doors that waited the train stood before them, silent yet immense, its shape dark against the star-scattered sky. The lanterns along its sides glowed with a strange silver fire that cast no warmth, only pale illumination across the sand. The doors were open, yawning like mouths that had waited centuries to be fed. The group did not move at first. They simply stood in awe, their breathing shallow, as though a single sound might shatter the moment and wake them from a dream. Kareem was the first to step closer, his bare feet sinking into the cool night sand. He clutched his grandfather's scarf so tightly it might have torn. His heart hammered, but his eyes burned with determination. My grandfather boarded, he whispered, almost to himself. If he found the courage, so will I. Layla's hand gripped the edge of her satchel until her knuckles whitened. She had written about myths all her life, filled pages with questions no one believed mattered. And now, the answer stood before her, made of brass, wood, and shadows. If I die, she murmured, at least I will die knowing truth. Yusef licked his lips, his eyes darting back and forth along the length of the train. To him it was not a ghost, but a treasure chest, its carriages filled with riches, secrets, perhaps immortality itself. He nearly stepped forward, but fear caught him by the ankles like chains. Alim remained still, his face unreadable, his staff pressed firmly into the sand. His silence was heavier than any words. The memory of Hamid was then that the desert's silence brought memory. Karim remembered his mother, asleep by the clay hearth, her hand resting on the woven blanket she had stitched for him. He had left without saying goodbye, sneaking into the night with his grandfather's scarf. His throat tightened at the thought of her waking to find him gone. Layla thought of the libraries she had left behind, the scholars who scoffed at her belief in fate. She saw their faces in her mind, smug, dismissive, blind. She wondered if she would ever return to prove them wrong, or if she would vanish like the others, leaving only a mystery behind. Yusef saw the crumbling walls of his shop, the creditors, notices nailed to his door, the laughter of rivals who prospered while he fell. To him, the train was not escape, but revenge, a way to claw back power. He told himself he had nothing to lose, but deep inside, he remembered the daughter who had once clung to his sleeve and asked him not to gamble again. And Olim thought of the countless journeys he had taken across the desert, the faces of travelers who had trusted his guidance, some of whom had not returned. He thought of his own first glimpse of the train, long ago, when he had turned away, a choice he had always wondered about, always doubted. Now the choice had returned, demanding an answer. The guide speaks finally. Alim lifted his staff and turned to them. His voice was deep, steady, carrying the weight of desert winds. "You must understand," he said. "To step aboard is not to take a journey, but to surrender to it. This train is not bound for places we know. It does not follow time as we do. You may find riches, or truth, or those you have lost, or you may find only silence. There is no promise." The words sank into them like stones into water. Layla's lips parted, but her voice trembled. "And if we do not board," Alim looked at her, his eyes dark as the night sky, "then you will live. You will carry the memory of this sight until the desert takes you. The choice is yours." The first footsteps, the silence returned, broken only by the distant creak of the train, as though it shifted under its own weight. Karim stepped forward again, closer to the open doors. His feet touched the shadow of the train, and a strange chill swept up his legs. He gasped, but he did not stop. "I will go," he said, his young voice steady. "If my grandfather is there, I will find him. If he is not, then I will know." Layla's eyes brimmed with tears. She felt the pull in her chest, stronger than fear, stronger than reason. She clutched her satchel, and with trembling hands, she followed Karim. Yusef hesitated, torn between greed and dread. The glow of the lanterns seemed to whisper to him, promising untold wealth. His fists clenched, and with a growl, he too stepped forward. Alim remained behind, his face stern. He watched them with eyes heavy with sorrow and pride alike. He did not move, not yet. The doorway between worlds, the three who stepped closest, now stood before the open doors. Inside, the train glowed faintly with golden light, yet the interior was blurred, as though wrapped in mist. Shadows moved, faintly within, seated figures who turned their heads toward the new arrivals. The air smelled of coal smoke and roses, sweet and bitter at once. Karim felt his heart leap. He thought, for an instant, that he saw the outline of his grandfather, seated by a window, waving to him. Layla blinked rapidly, her scholar's mind trembling. The figures wore clothes from many eras, some in robes, some in suits, some in garments she could not name. It was as if all centuries had gathered in one carriage. Yusef's breath quickened. He thought he saw piles of trunks stacked by the aisle, gold spilling from their seams. He reached forward, his hand shaking. Behind them, the desert wind rose suddenly, howling around the train, pulling at their robes, whipping sand into their faces. It was as though the desert itself resisted their choice, begging them to turn away. But the train waited, its doors unmoving, its silence an endless invitation. The hesitation before the step, the desert howled around them, sand swirling in chaotic spirals. Yet the train stood untouched, its lanterns unwavering, its doors unmoved. Karim clutched his grandfather's scarf, his chest rising and falling with the tremor of a boy torn between fear and longing. The scarf smelled faintly of smoke and cedar, the memory of his grandfather woven into every thread. "Grandfather," he whispered into the wind, "if you are inside, then guide my steps. Layla watched him, her heart torn. She was older, wiser perhaps, but she envied the boy's clarity. For her, the train represented not one truth but many: history, myth, science, memory. If she stepped aboard, she knew she would abandon everything she had once called logic. Her fingers brushed the spine of her journal. It was filled with sketches of dunes, scribbled theories, fragments of myths. Would she bring it with her into the unknown, or would the pages mean nothing, crumbling into irrelevance before the train's deeper truth? Yusef paced like a lion, his eyes darting back and forth between the glowing doors and the desert around him. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on his shoulders: his debts, his ruined name, his hollow home. All of it begged him to climb aboard. But something in the silence of the train unsettled him. Why had it come? Why now? Alam's voice cut through their thoughts, calm, yet sharp. Every man and woman must ask, he said, not what waits beyond those doors, but what they are willing to lose by crossing them. The desert's warning as if answering him. The desert stirred. The wind roared, louder, sharper, pulling harder at their clothes. The dunes themselves seemed to shudder, their slopes trembling as though alive. Kareem staggered, nearly falling. Layla shielded her eyes, sand stinging her skin. And then whispers, not faint this time, not vague. Clear voices, rising from the storm. Do not go, turn back, stay with us. They were familiar voices. Kareem froze. One of them was his mother's. He swore he heard her calling his name, weeping, pleading for him to return. Layla's eyes widened. The whispers became her father's voice, the man who had once told her myths were foolishness. She heard him, warning her, commanding her not to shame their family by chasing dreams. Yusef heard his daughter, a little girl's laugh, bright and sweet, but twisted now into a desperate cry. Baba, don't leave me. The desert was not merely resisting, it was clawing at their hearts, dragging their fears and loves into the open. Kareem covered his ears, shaking his head. No, she isn't here. It's a trick. Alim stepped closer, raising his staff. The desert tempts with memory, but memories are not chains. Stand firm. His words cut like a blade, breaking through the storm. Slowly, painfully, the group steadied themselves. The voices faded, the winds softened, and the desert grew still once more. And yet, the choice remained. The first step inside Kareem moved first. He had no wealth to lose, no reputation to protect, only the hope of finding the man who had raised him with stories of courage. He stepped across the threshold. The instant his bare foot touched the train's wooden floor, a strange sensation swept over him. The air was cooler, heavier, filled with the faint perfume of smoke and roses. A hum vibrated through the walls, not mechanical, but alive, like the slow heartbeat of some immense creature. He gasped, but he did not retreat. Instead, he clutched the scarf tighter and whispered, I'm here. Layla followed. Her hands trembled as she placed her first foot on the floorboards. 1,000 years of history seemed to crash against her mind, questions rising faster than answers. She swore the wooden panels beneath her feet shifted slightly, rearranging into shapes and symbols she did not recognize. Her eyes darted to the rows of shadowed figures inside. They sat still, unmoving, yet she felt their gazes burning into her. Not hostile, not welcoming, simply waiting. Yusef came next. His step was heavier, reluctant. The moment he crossed the threshold, he flinched. For a split second he swore the carriages glittered with treasure, gold coins piled high, jewels sparkling like stars. But when he blinked, the vision was gone. Only silence remained. Alim alone remained on the sand. His robes whipped in the wind as he gazed into the open doors, his jaw tight. His mind replayed the night from decades ago when he had stood in this same place, facing this same choice. Back then, he had turned away, fearing what lay inside. But now, seeing the boy, the scholar, the merchant, he knew the desert had brought him here again for a reason. With a deep breath, he lifted his staff, stepped forward, and entered the interior of the train. The doors slid shut behind them with a hiss, muffling the desert's eternal wind. The silence inside was profound, so deep it felt like sound itself had been swallowed. The group stood in a narrow aisle, flanked by rows of velvet seats. The fabric, though old, shimmered faintly in the lantern light. Dust motes floated in the air, though none settled on the surfaces. The seated figures, dozens of them, turned their heads slowly toward the newcomers, faces half hidden in shadow, eyes glinting faintly. Some were old, some young, some dressed in garments from ages long past. Karim's heart leaped. For an instant, he thought he saw his grandfather among them, smiling faintly, beckoning him closer. But when he blinked, the face was gone, replaced by another shadow. Layla pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. She saw a woman in scholar's robes from centuries ago, a figure she recognized from old portraits. But how could that be? Yusef looked past them all, his eyes darting to the windows. Beyond them, the desert stretched endlessly, but it looked different, darker, stranger, as though they had already crossed into another world. The train hummed, vibrating beneath their feet. The lanterns flickered once, then steadied, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the train began to move. The farewell in silence. None of them spoke at first. Their minds were too full of fear, of awe, of the weight of their choice. The world outside shifted slowly, dunes sliding past, the horizon tilting slightly, as though bending to the train's will. It felt as though they had stepped not into a machine, but into a dream. Alim finally spoke, his voice low. "We are no longer in the desert we knew." His words struck them with truth. The desert outside shimmered strangely, its shapes wrong, its colors muted, as though painted in half-light. Layla scribbled quickly in her journal, her hands shaking. "This is it. This is the threshold. Between worlds, between truths." Karim pressed his face to the window, tears running down his cheeks. "I'll find you, grandfather. I will." And Yusef sat rigid in his seat, his fists clenched, his eyes darting nervously at the shadowed passengers who continued to watch them in silence. The whistle blew again, long and mournful, echoing not just through the train, but through their very bones. The journey had begun. The carriage of shadows, the train's hum deepened as it glided soundlessly across the sands, carrying its unwilling guests farther from the world they knew. The lanterns swayed gently, their silver flames flickering without smoke. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of coal, roses, and something older, the faint temps of rust and forgotten time. The seated passengers did not speak. They turned their heads slowly, eyes glowing faintly in the dimness, watching the newcomers, with a stillness that was almost unbearable. It was not hostility, nor welcome, but recognition, as if they had been expecting them. Karim felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to call out to them, to ask if they had seen his grandfather, but his voice stuck, as though the train itself refused sound. Layla scribbled furiously in her journal, though the words appeared twisted, strange. Her ink spread across the paper in curling symbols she could not read, as though the pen itself had taken control. "No, no, this isn't me," she whispered, yet she kept writing, unable to stop. Yusef shifted uneasily, his eyes fixed on a man across the aisle. The figure's face was half-lit, revealing skin pale as marble, lips faintly parted. His eyes glimmered, following Yusef's every twitch. Yusef clenched his fists, looking away, but when he turned back, the seat was empty. Alim moved slowly down the aisle, his staff clicking against the wooden floor. His gaze swept the figures, his lips whispering prayers. "These are not the living," he murmured, "nor the dead. They are echoes." Windows that lied. The newcomers turned to the windows, desperate for distraction from the silent passengers, but what they saw only deepened the strangeness. At first glance, the desert rolled by as expected, endless dunes, stretching forever. But soon, the dunes shifted, shapes appeared, towers of glass, half buried in sand, cities that did not belong to any century they knew. Layla pressed her hand to the window, her breath fogging the glass. That's Alexandria," she whispered. "The lighthouse, still whole, but it fell centuries ago." A moment later, the scene dissolved, replaced by another, caravans of nomads crossing dunes with banners fluttering. Then that too melted into a vision of steel and iron, massive machines grinding through sand, their smoke choking the sky. Each blink revealed a new world, a new memory, as though the train sped not through space but through time itself. Karim's eyes widened. He saw a village, his village, with its small clay homes and winding alleys. He pressed his forehead to the glass, tears welling. "That's home, it's right there." But when he blinked, the vision was gone. Only desert remained. Yusef snarled, pounding a fist against the glass. "Illusions, tricks. What use are shadows of the past when we came for truth?" The whistle shrieked again, silencing him. Its sound rang through the carriage, vibrating their bones, commanding stillness. The passenger, who spoke until now, none of the shadowed passengers had made a sound. But as the train surged forward, one figure shifted. It was a woman, her skin pale as moonlight, her hair falling in black waves. She wore robes that shimmered like water. Slowly, she turned her head toward Karim, her eyes deep pools of silver dot, her lips parted, and her voice, though soft, filled the carriage. "You have come far to seek," she said. "But seeking is not the same as finding." The boy froze. His heart raced. Do you know my grandfather?" he asked, his voice trembling. The woman tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Names and faces are like sand. They shift, they scatter. Perhaps he was here, perhaps he still is, or perhaps he waits where the train has yet to go." Her words twisted through him, both comfort and torment. Layla leaned forward, desperate. "What is this train? Who built it? Why does it run?" The woman's eyes slid to her. For a moment Layla felt as if she were drowning, falling into those silver depths. The woman spoke again. "This train carries echoes, memories, regrets, longings. It is not built of iron, but of desire. Those who board bring their questions. Whether they leave with answers depends." Her voice faded. The woman blinked once, twice, and then her form blurred, dissolving into shadow until nothing remained in the seat. Silence reclaimed the carriage. The weight of the journey, the group sat in stunned quiet, their minds reeling. Karim clutched his scarf so tightly, his knuckles turned white. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew about him. She has to know." Layla's pen trembled as she wrote. Her notes made no sense. Her letters rearranged themselves into spirals, lines curving into eyes, into keys, into rails. "It's all connected," she murmured. "All of history, all of time. It's all here." Yusef rubbed his face with trembling hands. He wanted to curse, to rage, but no words came. He glanced around, searching for treasure, for proof of wealth, but all he found were the endless, watching eyes of passengers who did not speak. And Alim sat with his staff across his knees, his eyes closed. "This is not a journey of gold or knowledge," he said at last. "It is a journey of surrender. We have stepped into a dream that does not belong to us." The whistle blew again, low, mournful, infinite. The train rolled onward, carrying them deeper into the unknown. The rhythm of the rails, the train glided faster now. Its wheels did not screech. Its engine gave no smoke. Yet the air inside thrummed with a rhythm. Click-clack, click-clack. The sound came not from the floorboards, but from within their very chests, as though the train had replaced the beating of their hearts. Karim pressed his ear to the seat. The hum vibrated into his skull, carrying faint voices, men chanting, women weeping, children laughing. He sat up abruptly, eyes wide. "Do you hear it? They're inside the rails." Layla scribbled frantically, her handwriting jagged, spiraling into strange circles. "The train doesn't move across tracks, it moves through memory. Each sound is a life lived, each vibration a story gone." Yusuf shivered, pulling his robe tighter. "Nonsense," he muttered, though his voice cracked. "It's a machine, a trick, nothing more." Alim's gaze was fixed forward, past the endless aisle of shadowed passengers. His voice was quiet but firm. "The desert tests, the train delivers. Where we arrive will depend not on steel or sand, but on what we carry in our hearts." The first shudder without warning. The train jolted, not sharply, but enough to make their stomachs churn. The lanterns flickered. The passengers swayed without complaint. Karim grabbed the window frame, his eyes straining against the shifting night outside. "What was that? Are we stopping?" Layla peered out too, but the desert was no longer a desert. The dunes had melted away, replaced by a flat expanse of cracked stone. It stretched forever in all directions, glowing faintly as if lit from within. Thin fissures snaked across the ground, pulsing with pale light, like veins carrying some ancient lifeblood. Above, the sky was darker than night, yet streaked with rivers of stars. Constellations twisted unnaturally, shifting shape before her eyes. "It's not the desert anymore," Layla whispered, awe and fear blending in her voice. "It's something else." The phantom station, the whistle blew, sharp and commanding. Ahead, a shape emerged, a station, vast and crumbling, yet impossibly grand. Its roof arched high like the bones of some colossal beast, its pillars carved with symbols no one could read. Rusted lanterns swung from chains, glowing faintly with the same silver fire that burned inside the train. The group leaned toward the windows, their breath fogging the glass. Passengers stirred for the first time, turning their heads toward the approaching station with something like reverence. The train slowed, the hum lowering into a deep, resonant tone. Sparks of pale light drifted through the air, as though the world itself was unraveling. Alim's grip on his staff tightened. "We have arrived at the first station." Karim pressed his hands to the glass, his heart hammering. Maybe he's there, maybe grandfather's waiting. Layla's throat constricted as she scribbled, her words spilling onto paper in frantic strokes. A station that exists nowhere, a station of memory. Yusef's lips parted as he stared. His eyes gleamed with hunger. If there are treasures left by the forgotten, they will be here. The doors opened with a long hiss. The train's doors slid open once more. The desert's wind was gone. Instead, a cold breeze swept in, carrying scents of dust, iron, and incense. The station was silent. Silent in a way that weighed on the soul. A silence too deep, too ancient. One by one, the shadowed passengers began to rise. Their movements were slow, deliberate, yet they carried purpose. They stepped into the aisle, gliding toward the doors. Karim's breath caught. There, they're leaving. Layla leaned forward, trying to see their faces, but the shadows clung too tightly. One brushed past her, and for a moment she felt ice burn across her skin. The figures disembarked without a word, vanishing into the silver-lit ruins. The group could hear faint echoes, footsteps, whispers, sighs, but no true voices. Then, silence again. The station waited. The choice at the station. Alim turned to the others, his face stern. "This is the test. Every station will demand something. It may be truth, or it may be sacrifice. We cannot stand idle." Karim's fists clenched. He stepped toward the open doors, determination blazing in his eyes. "If he's there, I'll find him. I don't care what it asks." Layla hesitated, her journal clutched tight to her chest. Every fiber of her body screamed to follow, to document, to learn, to unravel this impossible mystery. Yusef licked his lips, the gleam of greed overtaking his fear. "Where there are ruins, there are riches. I'll not sit here like a fool." Alim closed his eyes, his heart heavy. "Then we go together. No one strays. Whatever awaits, we face it as one." Closing of chunk to the group gathered at the threshold, staring into the impossible station of light and ruin. The air pulsed with memory, with promises, with warnings. Beyond the open doors, shadows moved in the arches, not passengers, but something older, waiting. The lanterns swayed. The hum deepened, and together, with hearts pounding and breaths sharp, they stepped from the train into the unknown. Dawn through glass when the group stepped back onto the train. The doors shut silently behind them, sealing the ruinous phantom station away. None of them spoke. Their faces carried the hollow astonishment of travelers who had glimpsed something beyond comprehension, and yet had no choice but to continue forward. The train did not jolt or whistle. It simply moved. The desert's endless song returned, though now, through the windows. It was not quite the desert they remembered. At dawn, a pale orange glow seeped across the horizon, lighting the dunes in long shadows. But the light was strange. It bent, shimmered, making the sand look liquid, like molten gold shifting under their eyes. Karim pressed against the glass, his young face lit by the false dawn. "It feels alive," he whispered, "like the sand is breathing." Layla, bleary-eyed from a sleepless night, scribbled in her journal. The words on her page twisted and swirled again, yet she forced herself to keep writing. "If this is still the desert," she muttered. "It is a desert that refuses the laws of nature. It bends them to its will." Alim sat quietly, his staff across his knees, his gaze far away. The desert has always been alive. Men simply forget to listen. Yusef grunted, rubbing his temples. "Alive or dead, it looks the same to me. Nothing but sand. Endless, worthless sand." Yet, even as he spoke, his eyes darted to the wavering horizon, where shapes formed and dissolved, tempting the imagination. The heat that wasn't as the morning rose. The carriage grew warm, the lanterns dimmed, their silver glow yielding to the strange sunlight that poured through the windows. Sweat clung to Karim's brow. Layla fanned herself with a torn page from her journal, but then Alim reached out a hand. His palm hovered in the sunbeam. "It is warm, yes, but do you feel it?" Karim placed his hand in the same beam, his brow furrowed. "It isn't heat, not really. It feels like a memory of heat. Like the warmth you remember from a fire, but not the fire itself." Layla's pen stilled. She stared, entranced. "Illusion. This whole place is illusion. but illusions with weight, with shape. Yusef shook his head in frustration. Illusion or not, it burns my skin. He tugged at his collar, though no true sweat dampened his clothes. His body believed in the heat, and that belief was enough. The first mirage, by midday, the visions began. The train moved with its endless hum, but the world outside shifted in unsettling ways. The dunes swelled taller, peaks shimmering as though crowned in flame. Shadows twisted on the sand, forming shapes of people, walking, kneeling, reaching out. Karim's eyes widened. There, do you see them? People. Layla pressed closer, heart hammering. Silhouettes danced across the dunes, figures robed in white, their movements slow, ritualistic. A line of them wound across the sands, carrying something long and heavy upon their shoulders. A bier, a coffin, perhaps an altar. It looks like a procession, she breathed. An ancient rite. But when the train turned slightly, the figures blurred, scattering like smoke in the wind. The dunes were empty once again. Karim sank back into his seat, his small fists trembling. Why does it keep showing us things? Alim's voice was low, grave. The desert remembers, and we are forced to remember with it. The bond of travelers' hours passed. The sun climbed high and dipped low, though time itself felt uncertain. The train did not stop. The passengers of shadow remained silent, their faces unreadable. Only the four newcomers breathed, shifted, spoke. Weariness weighed on them. Layla closed her journal, her ink-stained fingers trembling. Karim leaned against the window, eyes half shut, scarf clutched like a talisman. Yusef muttered curses under his breath, while Alam's calm presence anchored them in the strange, shifting silence. Finally, Layla broke it. Her voice was soft, almost reluctant. Why did you come here, Yusef? Truly, the merchant stiffened. His jaw tightened. Why does anyone board? To find what was lost. To claim what others could not. Alem's eyes opened, steady on him. Riches will not weigh differently on this train than they do in your shop. They will crush you the same. Yusef glared, but he did not reply. His hand shook faintly where it rested on his knee. Karim looked up, voice small but sincere. I just want to see him again. My grandfather. If I could see him, just once more. Even if I can't stay. Silence followed. Even Yusef did not. Sneer. Layla sighed, her lips pressing into a thin line. I came for truth, for proof. All my life I have been told that myths are childish, that stories are lies. If this train proves them wrong, then I will have lived for something real. Alim's gaze softened. Each of you seeks something different, but remember, the desert gives only what it chooses, not always what you desire. A shared meal that night, as stars spilled across the sky outside the windows. Karim rummaged in his pack. His mother had stuffed it with flatbread dates and a small flask of goat's milk before he'd left. With shy hands, he offered it to the others. Layla smiled faintly, taking a piece of bread. Yusef grumbled but accepted a date, chewing in silence. Even Alim, solemn and restrained, bowed his head before sharing in the humble meal. It was not much, but it was real, far more real than the visions outside. For the first time, laughter stirred between them, faint but genuine. Karim told stories his grandfather had told him. Layla recited lines from forgotten poems, and Alim even allowed a small smile to crease his weathered face. Yusef remained quiet, but his gaze softened slightly as he watched the others. The bitterness did not fade, but it loosened, if only for a moment. The train hummed on, carrying them deeper into the desert of dreams. The mirage that spoke as the night deepened. The windows of the train glowed faintly, silver light seeping through the glass. Outside, the desert shifted again, not in dunes, but in patterns. Great spirals etched into the sand, glowing like embers, twisting toward infinity. Karim gasped, Look at that. Layla pressed her journal against the glass, sketching quickly. The spirals seemed to move as she drew, as though refusing to be captured. Yusef squinted, his eyes narrowing. Those aren't natural. No wind makes that. Alim's voice was calm, but heavy. They are not spirals of sand, they are spirals of thought. The desert is showing us the inside of our minds. And then the spirals shifted. From their glowing curves rose figures, men in armor, women in flowing robes, children running barefoot, their laughter echoing faintly even inside the train. The group stiffened, the figures looked too real, their voices too clear. Karim's eyes widened. That's my mother. A woman in simple linen appeared outside, her smile soft, her arms outstretched. Mama, he cried, pressing his hands against the glass. Layla gasped. My father. She saw him, stern-faced, standing tall, pointing at her accusingly. His voice carried through the glass. Myths will destroy you, Layla. Yusef reeled back. A girl stood outside, a little girl with bright eyes, clutching a doll. She waved. Baba, she whispered, come back to me. His lips trembled, but he said nothing. Alim closed his eyes tightly. He, too, saw someone, a younger version of himself, standing proud, robes white, his staff gleaming. The younger Alim glared at him. Coward, you turned away once, you will turn away again. The train's whistle screamed, cutting through the visions. The figures vanished like smoke, leaving only the endless glowing spirals. A nightmare shared, but the visions did not end when they vanished. Kareem blinked, shaking his head, and realized he was no longer in the carriage. He stood in the desert itself. The sand beneath his feet burned like fire, yet he did not sink. He spun, calling out for the others, but only the endless dunes answered. Layla stumbled through the same sands, clutching her journal, though its pages had turned to ash. She dropped it, falling to her knees, her voice breaking. It's gone. All of it's gone. Yusef wandered blindly, his daughter's laughter, chasing him, growing sharper, crueler, until it sounded like mocking. He covered his ears, but it pierced through. Alim walked alone, the younger version of himself beside him, jeering, you will never be enough. You will never face the truth. The four of them screamed at different things, in different ways, but their cries wove together in the same dream. Then, as if by fate, they collided. One by one, they stumbled into each other on the shifting sands. Kareem clutched Layla's arm, sobbing, you're real, aren't you? Layla held him tightly, her hands shaking. If you're not real, then I'll go mad. Yusef staggered toward them, his face pale, sweat dripping down his brow. He opened his mouth, ready to curse, but the words caught in his throat. His voice broke instead. I heard her. I swear, I heard her. Alim raised his staff, slamming it into the sand. The ground shuddered, the spirals breaking apart. Enough, he thundered. This is the train's trial. This is not the end. The desert shattered like glass. Back in the carriage they gasped awake, collapsing into their seats. Sweat drenched their brows, though the carriage was cool. Their chests heaved with the weight of what they had just endured. Kareem curled into himself, clutching his scarf. His small voice trembled. It felt so real. Layla's hands shook as she touched her journal. It was whole again, intact, its pages filled with her strange writings. If this is how the journey begins, she whispered, how will it end? Yusef buried his face in his hands, silent. The bitterness in his eyes had dulled, replaced with something raw, fear, or grief, or both. Alim steadied himself, though his own heart raced. He leaned on his staff and spoke firmly, almost to himself. The train shows us what we fear most. But remember this, fear is not prophecy. It is only a mirror. The bond forged in fear for a long while. None of them spoke. The train glided, the lanterns swayed, the passengers of shadow sat still. Finally, Kareem whispered, we all saw something, didn't we? The others exchanged uneasy glances. Layla nodded slowly. Yes, Yusef muttered, his voice low. And I never want to speak of it again. Alim shook his head. No, we must. If we do not share, it will eat us alive. Each mirage was different, but its claws were the same. Kareem swallowed hard, tears shining in his eyes. I saw my mother. She wanted me to stay, to go back. Layla closed her eyes. I saw my father. He said I was wrong, that I should have never come. Yusef's jaw tightened. He did not speak at first, but then the words spilled out. I saw my daughter. She called for me, but it wasn't her. It couldn't have been her. His voice cracked, and he fell silent again. Alim's expression was solemn. I saw myself, a man I once was, and he called me a coward. They sat together in silence again, but the silence was different now. It was not the silence of strangers, but of people bound by shared fear. The train hummed on, carrying them deeper into the endless sands. The drifting camp, the train's rhythm deepened as dusk painted the sky, violet and gold. Through the windows, the sands shifted once more, not into spirals this time, but into something startlingly familiar. A camp. Dozens of black tents dotted the dunes, their triangular peaks sharp against the horizon. Smoke rose from small fires, curling lazily into the twilight. Camels knelt beside the tents, their saddles glinting faintly. People moved about, men with long staffs, women carrying clay jars. children chasing each other barefoot across the sand. Karim gasped, his hands pressing to the glass. Nomads, real nomads. His eyes glowed with hope. We're not alone out here. Layla leaned closer, her scholar's instincts stirring. Look at their dress, the weaving, the cut of their robes. This is ancient, older than any tribe I've seen. These people, they could be centuries gone. Yusef narrowed his eyes. His greed had quieted, but suspicion sharpened. Or it's another trick. Alem's voice was low. The desert does not show without reason. Watch carefully. The invitation as the train drew parallel to the camp. One of the figures turned its head. A tall man stood at the edge of the tents, his robes fluttering in the wind, his face half in shadow. Slowly, he raised his hand and beckoned. The gesture was unmistakable. Come. Karim's breath caught. He's calling us. Layla's heart raced. Her pen scratched across the page. If these are mirages, they shouldn't notice us. But he does. He sees us. Yusef clenched his fists. If he wants us off this train, then I want the opposite. No phantom shepherd will trick me into walking to my death. But Karim turned to the others, desperation in his eyes. What if they're real? What if they have food, water, answers? We can't just ignore them. The whistle shrieked, piercing their debates. The train slowed, its hum lowering, as though it too responded to the figure's summons. The doors slid open with their familiar hiss. The desert wind rushed in, carrying the scent of smoke, roasted meat, and faint incense. Stepping into the camp, Halim rose first, his staff steady. If we go together. No one wanders alone. They descended into the sand. The moment their feet touched it, the warmth of the day's mirage returned. A heat that was not heat, a fire that did not burn. Yet their bodies believed, and they sweated under its weight. The camp bustled with life. Women stirred pots over fire. Men tended to camels. Children darted between shadows. Yet none spoke. Not a single sound rose from their lips. The tall man approached. His eyes gleamed silver in the firelight, reflecting the lanterns of the train, though he stood far from it. He bowed once, his movements graceful, almost ritualistic. Welcome, travelers, he said. His voice was soft, like sand sliding across stone. You have crossed into memory. This is a place where the forgotten gather. Karim's voice trembled. Are you alive? The man smiled faintly. We are as alive as memory allows. Sit, eat, rest. For tomorrow, the desert will demand more of you. The silent feast. They were led to a tent, its fabric black as night. Inside, cushions lay in a circle. A low table spread with food, flatbreads, figs, roasted lamb, bowls of steaming grains. The travelers hesitated. Layla whispered, "This cannot be real. It's illusion. Food conjured from nothing." Yusef scoffed. Illusion or not, my stomach doesn't care. He tore a piece of bread, biting deeply. To his surprise, it tasted warm, rich, spiced with cumin and salt. He moaned softly, "By the heavens, it's real enough." Karim grabbed dates, chewing hungrily, tears brimming in his eyes. It tastes like home. Layla lifted a fig, turning it in her hand. When she bit, sweetness exploded across her tongue, filling her with both delight and sorrow. She remembered her father's voice, stern and heavy, telling her that knowledge was hunger that could never be satisfied. And yet, here she was, eating memory itself. Alim did not eat. He watched the silent hosts, his eyes wary. Food binds. To eat here may mean to remain here. The tall man knelt beside him, eyes still silver. Nothing here is without cost. Guide, you know this. Alim's jaw tightened. Still, he reached for nothing. Whispers by the fire after the meal. The group gathered outside near a fire. The flames were silver, like the train's lanterns, and their crackling produced no sound. Children sat nearby, their eyes wide and glowing faintly. Women hummed without voices. Men moved like shadows, their every gesture carrying weight. Karim leaned toward Layla, whispering, "Do you think they're trapped, like passengers of the train?" Layla's pen hovered above her page. Perhaps, or perhaps they're fragments of lives, preserved because someone remembered them. Maybe this whole camp is only a memory that refuses to fade. Yusef scoffed, though his voice trembled. If they're memory, then why do they feed us? Why do they see us? Alim's gaze was steady on the fire, because memory is not past. It is alive. And tonight, it has chosen us. The warning at last. The tall man returned. His robes whispered against the sand, his presence commanding. He looked at each of them in turn. Karim clutching his scarf, Layla clutching her journal, Yusuf with crumbs at his beard, Alim, silent and steady. Tomorrow, the sands will open. You will see more than visions. The desert will test not your eyes, but your hearts. Be wary of what you cling to, for what you cling to may cling back. The words lingered, heavy and strange, and before they could reply, the fire dimmed, the camp blurred, fading like mist. One blink, and they were standing once more at the threshold of the train. The doors closed behind them, sealing the desert camp into memory. The passengers of shadow had not moved. The lanterns glowed. The hum resumed. The train rolled onward. The train speeds on the train surged forward, faster than before. Its windows rattled with a low vibration, though its wheels made no sound. Outside, the desert darkened under a sky choked with stars, millions upon millions, blazing brighter than any the group had ever seen. Karim pressed his forehead to the glass, awe shimmering in his eyes. It's like the heavens are falling. Layla scribbled, her hand struggling to keep pace with her thoughts. Not falling, she murmured, expanding. The desert isn't only sand, it's space itself. It stretches beyond time. Yusuf frowned, though his eyes betrayed wonder. If this is space, then where are we headed? Stars don't have stations. Alim's grip on his staff tightened. The destination is never written. We will learn only when we arrive. Bonds forged by fire hours blurred. The train's hum lulled them into a strange rhythm, the monotony broken only by flickers of memory on the glass, shadows of the camp they had left, faces of the silent nomads. But instead of fear, something else stirred. Karim rummaged again in his pack, offering the last of his bread. This time, even Alim accepted a piece. Layla shared her water, though it tasted faintly of dust. Yusuf, reluctant, pulled a pouch of dried apricots from his robe and tossed it onto the table between them. No sense starving, he muttered. Karim grinned, taking one quickly. See, you're not all bad. Yusuf rolled his eyes, but a small smirk tugged at his lips. For the first time, laughter rippled softly between them. It was quiet, tentative, but real. In the midst of the train's eerie silence, it sounded almost rebellious, like warmth pushing against cold. Stories in the dark as the silver lanterns swayed. Layla spoke, her voice low and thoughtful. My grandmother used to tell me stories of a train like this. She said it carried souls between worlds, that its smoke was woven from memories. I thought she was mad. Karim leaned closer, eager. What else did she say? That it doesn't always bring you where you want to go, Layla whispered, but where you need to go. Alim nodded slowly. Wisdom hidden in myth, truth wrapped in parable. Yusuf shifted uncomfortably. And what if, where I need to go is worse than where I am? What then? Alim met his gaze. Then you will know yourself fully. That is the only treasure worth more than gold. For a moment, Yusuf said nothing. Then, quietly, he looked away. The song of the rails Karim began humming softly, a lullaby his grandfather had sung to him. The tune was shaky at first, but Layla recognized it. She joined in, her voice weaving with his, faint but clear. Alim closed his eyes, adding a low hum, steady as the train's rhythm. Even Yusuf, after a long hesitation, tapped the table with his fingers, marking the beat. The sound filled the carriage. It rose above the train's hum, above the silence of the shadow passengers. For a few precious moments, they were not lost. Travelers aboard a ghostly machine, they were human, together, alive. A glimpse of tomorrow. The train rounded a bend, and for the first time, a horizon appeared. It glowed faintly with a pale blue light, like dawn breaking through glass. Karim's eyes widened. Do you see it? Another station. Layla scribbled, her heart racing. No, not a station. Something else. A place the desert hasn't hidden. Alim leaned forward, his breath slow. Tomorrow, the desert will reveal its next trial. Yusuf muttered, but his tone was softer than before. And we'll face it together, I suppose. Karim smiled faintly. Together? Closing of chunk. One. The train roared into the night, carrying them toward the pale horizon. Their bellies were no longer empty, their voices no longer silent. Though fear clung to them still, they had found something stronger than fear, the fragile beginnings of trust. The hum deepened, the lanterns swayed, and beyond the windows, the desert of dreams shifted once more, preparing its next secret. The night halt. The train slowed as night swallowed the desert whole. Its silver lanterns dimmed, their glow soft and warm, as though the machine itself wanted to rest. For the first time since they had boarded, the train sighed, a long, low sound that almost resembled a yawn. Kareem stirred from half-sleep, blinking. Are we stopping? Layla rubbed her eyes. It feels different, quieter, like the desert itself is holding its breath. Indeed, the humming rhythm faded until it was only a faint vibration beneath their feet. The shadow passengers stirred, not to leave, but to shift, settling more deeply into their seats. Some placed their heads against the glass, as if listening to whispers outside. Then the doors slid open, not with the hiss of command, but a gentle parting, an invitation. Aleem rose, staff in hand. It is night. The desert calls for story. Come, the fire beyond the train. They stepped onto the sands. To their surprise, not darkness, but firelight awaited them. A great circle of flames burned in the distance, though no wood fed it. The flames themselves shimmered silver and gold, dancing without smoke. Figures sat around it, nomads, travelers, and wanderers of ages long past. Some wore robes like ancient kings, others ragged clothes from forgotten centuries. All were silent, faces lit by the glow. Kareem clutched his scarf tightly. Who are they? Alam's gaze was steady. Those who once crossed, those who never left. Layla scribbled, her eyes wide, a gathering of memory, of all who dared the train. Yusef's lip curled uneasily. If they are memory, why do they sit as though alive? Because memory is alive, Alim said softly. The first story. As they drew near, one of the figures lifted his head, an old man, skin like parchment, eyes glowing faintly blue. His lips moved, and though his voice was cracked with age, it filled the air as though spoken by the desert itself. Once, he said, there was a king who thought he could master the sands. He built a city of stone in the desert's heart, high walls to keep out storms, great wells to drink eternity. He told his people, the desert bends to me, but the desert does not bend. One night, the winds rose, the sands sang, and by dawn, nothing of his city remained. Not stone, not well, not name. Only the echo of arrogance. The fire flared. The figures around the circle nodded, though no sound left their throats. Kareem swallowed. So, the desert punishes pride. Alim's eyes glimmered. The desert punishes forgetting. To believe it can be owned is to forget it is alive. The lullaby of shadows. Another figure rose, a woman, veiled, her eyes reflecting firelight. She did not speak. Instead, she sang. Her voice was soft, wordless, weaving through the night like smoke. The lullaby had no lyrics, only hums and tones that rose and fell, carrying sorrow and peace together. Karim's eyes fluttered, heavy with sleep. Layla lowered her pen, entranced, her heart aching without knowing why. Even Yusef, restless and bitter, leaned forward unconsciously, as if the sound had reached into a part of him he had long hidden. The flames pulsed with her song, each note sending sparks drifting into the starlit sky. The desert seemed to sway, in rhythm, dunes breathing slowly, like the chest of a sleeping giant. Aleem bowed his head. It is the desert's cradle song. It soothes those who wander, and warns those who linger. The story within the song. As the woman sang, visions rose in the flames. They saw a child walking alone through dunes, guided by stars. They saw a caravan collapse beneath a storm, its travelers scattering into shadows. They saw lovers meeting in secret beneath a dune's curve, their embrace swallowed by time. Each vision was fleeting, dissolving into sparks. Yet they left a weight on the heart, as if each traveler had lived them in another life. Kareem whispered, I felt that, like it was mine. Layla shivered, tears stinging her eyes. It was everyone's. All of us carry pieces of the desert. The song ended, and silence fell once more. Only the flames crackled, soft and eternal. The circle narrows one by one. The travelers around the fire turned their glowing eyes toward the newcomers, the weight of their gaze pressed down, as though asking silently, what story do you bring? Kareem looked to Aleem, nervous. Do we have to tell one? Aleem's voice was firm. Every traveler must give to the fire. Memory feeds memory. Without it, the circle breaks. Yusef scoffed quietly. I don't tell stories, but the eyes of the fire pressed harder. Even he fell silent. Kareem's tale, the boy and the goats, the firelight danced on Kareem's young face as he swallowed nervously. All those glowing eyes weighed on him. But then, slowly, he began. There was once a boy in my village, he said, his voice trembling. He was poor, and all he had was one goat. The goat was stubborn and loud, but it gave milk, and the boy loved it more than anything. One day, the goat wandered into the desert. The boy ran after it, calling, begging it to come back. But the goat was wild, and it leaped higher and higher over the dunes, always just out of reach. The boy never caught it, but as he ran, he saw the stars clearer, he felt the sand softer, and he learned the desert's song. And though he never found his goat, he came home with something else, a piece of the desert inside his heart. Kareem lowered his head, embarrassed. It's not much, just a story my grandfather told me. But the fire flickered, and sparks rose high, as though the flames had accepted his tale. The glowing eyes around the circle nodded. Alim placed a hand on Karim's shoulder. A small story is not lesser. It is pure, and purity feeds the fire. Layla's tale, the queen of stars. Layla's eyes shone, emboldened. She leaned forward, her pen forgotten, her voice calm but rich. In the old texts, she said, there was once a queen who believed the stars were her children. Every night, she stood on her palace roof, whispering to them. They answered with light, guiding her armies, blessing her fields. But one night, she demanded too much. She asked the stars to descend, to bow before her throne. They warned her, if we come down, we will burn you. But she insisted, so they fell, streaks of fire, and her city blazed with them. By dawn, nothing remained but ashes. Yet the people said they could still see her crown in the sky, a cluster of stars that burned brighter than the rest. A queen, punished and remembered. Her voice faded. For a moment, silence pressed heavy. Then the fire roared higher, its silver flames licking the sky. The circle of memory swayed, their faceless heads turning upward as though seeing the queen's crown still burning. Layla exhaled shakily. I don't know if it's true, but myths always carry truth. Somewhere Alim nodded, truth wrapped in story. You understand now why stories live. Yusef's tale, the daughter's laughter at last. All eyes turned to Yusef. He stiffened, his jaw tight. He had always been the skeptic, the doubter, the one who mocked. But here, in the fire's circle, even he could not escape. His voice cracked when he began. I had a daughter once. Her name was Selma. She laughed more than anyone I ever knew. Her laughter could lift a market, silence an argument, mend a wound. I swore to protect that laughter. His throat worked. He looked away, but the fire pressed him on. One day, a sickness came. Not even gold could cure it. Her laughter grew quiet. Then it stopped, and his breath caught, his fists clenched. I have not heard laughter since. He fell silent, his shoulders shaking. The fire hissed, sparks bursting violently into the night. Then it softened, its glow wrapping around him like an embrace. The circle of glowing eyes lowered their heads in respect. No one spoke. Even Kareem, small and innocent, pressed closer to Yusef, resting his head against the man's arm. For once, Yusef did not push him away. Alim's tale, the lesson of silence finally. Alim stood. His presence was tall, steady, and when he spoke, his voice carried like wind across dunes. There was once a seeker who asked the desert for truth. He shouted at the dunes, demanding answers. The desert stayed silent. He cursed the sands, wept, struck the earth with his fists. Still, silence. At last, the seeker lay down, exhausted, and let the silence fill him. He stopped demanding, stopped asking, and only then did he hear the truth. For the desert does not speak in words, it speaks in silence, and silence is the hardest truth to hear. The fire stilled. The sparks froze mid-air, glowing gently, like stars suspended above the circle. The silent figures bowed their heads as one, acknowledging the weight of the tale. Alim lowered his gaze. This is what I bring. Not answers, not pride, only silence. The circle's response, the flames flared high, then bent inward, as though bowing to the travelers. A whisper rippled through the gathering, not spoken, but felt. Your stories are accepted. The desert remembers. The figures around the fire began to dissolve, their glowing eyes blinking out one by one, leaving only the four of them in the circle. The silver flames shrank, then sank into the sand, leaving darkness behind. The desert was silent again, and the train's doors waited, open, glowing softly. The desert's dream as they stepped back toward the waiting train. None of them spoke. The fire's glow still lingered in their eyes, the echo of their stories heavy in their hearts. But as they crossed the threshold, something shifted. The lanterns inside the carriage dimmed, flickering faintly, as though shadows had breathed across them. The hum of the train slowed, softer, deeper, until it was like a lullaby, a song not heard with the ears, but felt in the bones. Kareem rubbed his eyes. I feel sleepy. Layla blinked, her pen falling from her hand. No, not sleep, something else. Alim gripped his staff tightly. He knew the sensation, the edge between waking and dream. The silver glow of the lanterns thickened, folding inward. And one by one, the travelers drifted into visions. Karim's dream, the goat returns. Karim found himself running again across the desert. The same boy from his story, his scarf flapped wildly in the wind. But this time, the goat he chased stopped at the top of a dune and turned. Its eyes glowed golden, almost human, and its voice was deep. You did not lose me, it said. I only ran to show you the stars. Karim's chest tightened, tears filled his eyes. Will you stay with me now? The goat only bowed its head, vanishing into sand, and when Karim looked up, the stars blazed brighter than ever before, forming a path across the heavens. Layla's dream, the crown of the Queen. Layla stood in the ruins of a great palace. Marble pillars cracked, banners torn. The air shimmered with heat, and above, the stars blazed like burning jewels. A voice whispered, "Daughter of ink, seeker of myths, will you demand too much?" As she did, the queen of her tale appeared radiant, her crown aflame with starlight. She reached toward Layla. Come, the queen said. Take my crown, wear it, rule the stars. Layla's heart pounded. She wanted it, the knowledge, the power, the glory of being remembered. But even as her hand lifted, she felt her father's voice again, stern, accusing. Myths will destroy you, Layla. She froze, trembling, caught between desire and warning. Yusef's dream, the echo of laughter. Yusef stood in the courtyard of his old home. The air was warm, the scent of jasmine drifting. And there was Salma, his daughter, running with her doll, laughing, her curls bouncing in the sun. He staggered forward, heart breaking open. Salma, my little one. She turned, her face glowing with joy. But as he reached for her, her laughter deepened, echoing strangely, until it no longer belonged to a child. It grew hollow, cruel, a chorus of voices mocking him. Her figure blurred, dissolving into smoke. The doll fell to the ground, its porcelain face cracked, eyes staring lifelessly. Yusef collapsed, clutching it, his chest heaving. No, not again. Alim's dream, the younger self, stood in a vast hall, carved from sandstone, pillars rising like ancient trees. At the far end stood his younger self, robes white, staff glowing, eyes burning with pride. You left, the younger Alim said coldly. You abandoned truth when it demanded your sacrifice. You chose silence not out of wisdom, but out of fear. Alim's jaw clenched. No, I chose silence because words would have destroyed more than they saved. Cowardice, the younger self hissed. You guide them now, but you will fail them, as you failed before. The two figures circled, staff against staff, echo against flesh, until the hall itself shook. The shared awakening, the visions ended all at once. The group jolted awake, gasping, drenched in sweat. The lanterns steadied, glowing silver once more. Karim clung to his scarf, tears on his cheeks. It felt so real. Layla's hands trembled as she grabbed her journal. The queen. She asked me to take her crown. Yusef sat in silence, his fists shaking, his eyes dark with grief. Alim leaned heavily on his staff, his chest heaving. The fire showed us stories, but the train shows us truths we fear to face. They fell silent, the hum of the train filling the void. But something had changed. Though the visions had shaken them, they had shared them together. Their fears were no longer secret, and in the quiet, they began to feel not just like passengers, but companions. Speaking the visions, the carriage was silent at first, each of them trapped in the weight of their dreams. The hum of the train filled the stillness, steady as a heartbeat. Finally, Karim spoke, his voice thin. I saw the goat again, the one from my story, but this time, it spoke to me. His eyes shimmered as he clutched his scarf. It said I hadn't lost it, that it only ran to show me the stars. He looked at the others desperately. Do you think that means something? Layla gave a faint smile. Perhaps it means you are not lost either, Karim. Maybe. The desert is guiding you, the same way. Alim nodded. Visions often speak in riddles, but the boy is right to listen. The desert's gifts are rarely simple. Layla's confession. Layla pressed her journal to her chest, her fingers trembling. My queen, the one in my story. She came to me. She offered me her crown. Her voice cracked, and I almost took it. I wanted it. All the knowledge, all the glory, all the power of the stars. I almost forgot her punishment, her arrogance. Her eyes watered. I am no better than her. Maybe my father was right. Maybe my hunger for myths will destroy me. Kareem leaned toward her earnestly. But you didn't take it. You stopped. Alim's deep voice rumbled gently. To face desire and turn away is greater wisdom than to never feel desire at all. Layla wiped her tears, her breath shaky but steadier. Yusef's shattered truth for a long while. Yusef said nothing. His eyes were locked on the floor, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and raw. I saw her again, my daughter. No one moved. She was laughing, alive. For a moment I thought I had her. Back his chest heaved, but it wasn't real. The laughter turned cruel. It mocked me. She turned to smoke. He lifted his hands, shaking. Even here, I cannot escape her loss. Even in dreams, I am punished. Kareem placed his hand on Yusef's arm again, just as he had by the fire. It's not punishment, it's memory. She's still with you. That's why you hear her. Yusef's lips quivered, but no words came. For once, he did not push the boy away. Alim's reflection all straightened slowly. His staff pressed against the floor. His voice was grave but calm. My vision showed me myself, younger, prouder, a man who thought wisdom meant control. He called me coward, accused me of hiding in silence. He inhaled deeply. Perhaps he was right. Silence is wisdom only, when chosen freely. But when silence is forced by fear, it becomes weakness. He looked at the others. I will not let silence break me again, nor will I let it break you. For the first time, his eyes softened, filled with quiet resolve. Companions, not strangers, the four of them sat together, the lantern lights swaying gently around them. Something had changed. The visions had stripped them bare, laying there, souls open, no masks, no secrets. Kareem with his innocence, Layla with her hunger, Yusef with his grief, Alim with his silence. Each carried a burden. Each had been seen. Layla whispered, almost to herself, perhaps that is why we were brought together. The desert shows us not only itself, but each other. Kareem smiled faintly. If we face what's ahead, at least we won't face it alone. Yusef let out a long, shaky breath, then muttered, don't make me say it out loud. But yes, together. The train's lullaby as if answering them. The train's hum deepened. The silver lanterns pulsed softly, glowing like stars in rhythm. The sound was no longer just a mechanical vibration. It was music. A soft melody rose, a lullaby made of rails and wind, echo and silence. It wrapped around them like a mother's song, soothing their hearts, cooling their fears. Their eyelids grew heavy, not from exhaustion, but from peace. Even Yusef, whose grief was a storm, closed his eyes with a sigh. Kareem leaned against Layla's shoulder, already drifting. Alim sat tall, but his grip on his staff loosened. His breath steadying. The train sang them to rest. Closing of the chunkans so they slept, not in fear, not in solitude, but in fragile unity. The desert outside stretched endlessly, but inside the carriage, for one fleeting night, there was comfort. The flames of memory had tested them. The visions had stripped them, and now the train, in its silver lullaby, had blessed them with silence that did not wound, but healed. The night rolled on. The train carried them deeper into mystery, and the desert listened. The dream-bound carriage, the lullaby of the train lingered even after their eyes had closed. For the first time since boarding, they slept deeply, yet it was not sleep as they knew it. It was something stranger, heavier, like falling not into darkness but into liquid silver. When Kareem opened his eyes, he was still inside the train. The lanterns glowed faintly, but the windows no longer showed the desert. Instead, vast oceans rolled outside, waves shimmering under starlight. A silver moon floated so close it seemed he could touch it. He blinked and rubbed his eyes. Layla, are you awake? She stirred across from him, lifting her head. I see it too. But how? Alim was already watching, his face unreadable. We are dreaming, but the dream is shared. Yusef frowned, his fists tightening. I don't share dreams, but even he could not deny it. The world outside the windows was real enough to make his stomach twist. Oceans in the desert, the train glided silently across waves instead of dunes, its wheels leaving trails of silver foam. The rhythmic hum beneath their feet had turned into the sound of water lapping gently against wood. Karim pressed his face eagerly to the glass. It's beautiful. The desert turned into a sea. Layla scribbled in her journal, her hands trembling, not turned, revealed. In myths, the desert is sometimes called the dry ocean. Perhaps this is what it meant. Yusuf muttered, or, we've gone mad. Alim's voice was steady. Madness, or truth. The dream demands, we witness it. Passengers of mist from the mist rising off the silver waves, shapes began to form. At first, faint shadows, then faces, then entire figures walking across the water, as if it were solid ground. They moved toward the train, stepping without sound. Some were veiled women, their eyes glimmering with sorrow. Others were men carrying instruments, broken and cracked. Children darted between them, laughter like bells. Karim gasped. They're boarding, and indeed, as the train slowed, the doors opened, and these dreamlike passengers stepped inside. They filled the empty seats across the carriage, settling silently. Their eyes glowed faintly blue, their movements slow and graceful, as though made of mist. Layla whispered, "Who are they?" Alim's face darkened. Echoes. Fragments of travelers who dreamed too long. The conversation of shadows, and, like the first shadow passengers, these figures spoke. Their voices were whispers, but audible like wind through reeds. Sea remembers what the desert forgets. The train carries not bodies, but burdens. To dream too deeply is to dissolve. Each phrase floated through the carriage, disjointed yet heavy with meaning. Karim clutched Alim's sleeve nervously. What does that mean? Dissolve. Alim did not answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the glowing figures. Layla leaned forward, daring. What are you? Are you real? One of the women turned, her face veiled in silver mist. We were real. Once, we boarded as you did, but we stayed too long. The dream is sweet, child. Too sweet to leave. Her voice faded, but her hand pressed gently against the window. The glass rippled like water beneath her touch. The shifting carriage, the carriage itself, began to change. The velvet seats melted into sand dunes, then reformed into cushions of cloud. The brass lamps stretched upward, glowing like constellations, then shrank again. Each blink revealed a new world. One moment, they sat in a palace hall of marble. The next, they floated in a cave of crystal. Karim laughed nervously. It's like the train doesn't know where it is, Layla whispered. Or it knows too many places, Yusuf growled, gripping the edge of his seat. Enough. Dreams or not, I won't be toyed with. He rose to his feet, but the floor rippled under him like water. He staggered, catching himself against a pillar that hadn't been there a moment before. The mist turned their heads in unison, eyes glowing brighter. Their whispers grew louder. Stay, stay, stay. Closing of this section, the four travelers exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, the dream did not feel wondrous. It felt dangerous, like a current pulling them deeper. Alim's voice cut through, steady but grim. Remember this, dreams are rivers. Drink too deeply, and you drown. The mist passengers leaned closer, their eyes burning with desperate hunger. And the train, silent and endless, carried them forward into the shifting dreams. The whispering offers. The mist passengers leaned closer, their glow flickering like candlelight in the wind. Their whispers grew clearer, each threading itself into the ears of the living travelers, tugging at the softest corners of their souls. Stay, one murmured, her voice smooth as honey. Here, pain is washed away. Here, time does not wound. Here, you can have what you lost. The words sank into the air like perfume, heavy and intoxicating. To Karim, the goat of stars, a small, boy-shaped mist figure, shuffled forward. Its body glowed faintly golden, and in its hand, it held the leash of a familiar goat. Karim's breath hitched. His eyes widened, his chest rising and falling too quickly. It's you, he whispered. You came back. The goat's eyes shimmered, with the same strange warmth as in his dream. It nuzzled Karim's arm, its fur soft and real. For a moment, Karim forgot the train, forgot the desert, forgot everything but the comfort of the creature pressed against him. The mist child spoke. Stay with us, Karim. The goat is yours forever. No more losing, no more chasing, only peace. Karim trembled. Forever. The word tasted sweet, too sweet. To Layla, the crown of fire from the mist, the queen of her vision, emerged. Taller now, radiant, her crown blazing with starlight. She extended her hand toward Layla, her voice smooth as silk. daughter of ink, child of doubt, the world has mocked you, dismissed you, silenced your pen, but I will give you what you crave: knowledge, recognition, immortality." The queen leaned closer, her crown burning brighter. "Write the myths into stone, and the stars themselves will sing your name." Layla's hand shook over her journal, her eyes glistened, wide and hungry. "But if I take it," she whispered, "will it burn me as it burned you?" The queen smiled, a smile both kind and cruel. "Does it matter? To be remembered forever is worth any fire." To Yusef, the daughters returned. The mist swirled and condensed into a small figure: Salma. Her curls bounced, her doll tucked under one arm, her laughter bubbling. Yusef froze, his throat locked, his legs weak. He staggered forward, nearly collapsing, his hands reaching for her. "Papa," she said sweetly. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, pure and golden. He choked. "Salma. Salma, is it you?" The figure nodded eagerly. "Yes, Papa, stay. With me, we'll never be apart again. No more sickness, no more loss. Just us. Forever." Tears streamed down his face. His hands shook as they hovered over her shoulders, terrified to touch her, and terrified not to. His voice broke. "If I stay, will you really be mine again?" The mist girl smiled, wide and innocent. "Always." To Alim, the younger self from the shifting shadows, stepped Alim's younger self again, tall, proud, staff glowing with light. His voice was strong, commanding. Everything the elder Alim had once been. "You've grown weak," the younger version said. "You've traded truth for silence, wisdom for doubt, but you can be strong again. Stay, and I will make you what you were meant to be, the greatest guide the desert has ever known." The younger Alim raised his staff, the glow so bright it forced the others to look away. "Together, we will rule the sands, not serve them. Not bow rule." The elder Alim's grip tightened on his own staff. His jaw clenched, sweat dripping down his brow. For a moment, he almost looked tempted. The carriage trembles, the whispers swelled, the voices of the mist passengers blending together into a choir. The carriage itself seemed to lean toward the four, urging them to surrender. "Stay, stay, stay." The walls rippled like water. The floor shifted beneath their feet. For a moment, it felt as though they were no longer on a train at all, but floating in the heart of the dream itself. Karim clutched the goat tightly. Layla's trembling hand hovered closer to the queen's crown. Yusef was only a breath away from his daughter. Alim's staff shook in his grip, torn between himself and his shadow. It would only take one word, one choice, one surrender, and they would belong to the dream forever. The edge of surrender, the dream pressed against them, heavy as chains, sweet as honey. Every breath was filled with whispers, every heartbeat echoing the call. "Stay, stay, stay." Karim buried his face against the goat's neck. Its fur was soft, its warmth real. The boy trembled with joy and terror all at once. "I don't want to lose you again," he whispered desperately. "Please don't go." Layla's fingers hovered inches from the queen's blazing crown. The fire of it lit her face, painting her eyes with hunger. "All the knowledge," she murmured, "all the glory. My words would never fade." Yusuf fell to his knees, tears streaming as he held his daughter's hands in his. "I will never let you go again," he sobbed. "Never." And Alim stood face to face with his younger self. Prideful eyes stared into his own weary ones. "Choose," the younger Alim urged, his voice deep and commanding. "Seize strength or sink into weakness. The desert will not wait." The hum of the train deepened. The floor rippled like water, as though preparing to swallow them whole. The intervention Alim's staff struck the ground with a sharp crack. The sound cut through the whispers like thunder through fog. "Stop," he commanded, his voice trembling with effort, but strong enough to pierce the dream. His eyes swept across the others. "Do you not see? This is no gift. It is a chain." The mist passengers hissed, their blue eyes burning brighter, their whispers sharpened into cries. "Do not listen. Stay, stay." Karim looked up, tears streaking his cheeks. "But it's real, Alim. I can feel him. My goat is back." Alim's voice softened, though pain lined his words. "Karim, what you feel is memory, not life. The desert gives echoes, not returns. If you stay, you will not live with your goat. You will become the echo beside it." The boy faltered, his hand trembling. The goat bleated softly, pressing closer. For a moment, Karim's small heart wavered. Layla's struggle. Layla's hand hovered above the crown. Her lips parted, her breath shaking. But this is everything I dreamed of. A legacy, a truth that will never fade. The queen's burning eyes met hers. Take it, child. Be remembered forever. Alim's gaze turned to her, steady and firm. Layla, to be remembered by fire is to be consumed by it. You are more than stories etched into stone. Your words matter because you lived to speak them. Her eyes filled with tears. But what if I'm forgotten? Then you will still have lived, Alim said gently. That is enough. It is always enough. The crown pulsed brighter, tempting, demanding. Layla's hand shook violently. At last, with a sob, she drew it back. The queen hissed, her fiery form cracking into shards of starlight before dissolving. Layla fell back into her seat, clutching her journal as though it were her lifeline. Yusef's breaking point. Yusef clung to the girl before him, his whole body shaking. Her laughter, her warmth, her little hands in his. It was everything he had prayed for, everything he had lost. Baba, the girl whispered sweetly. Stay with me. Don't let me go again. His tears dripped onto her doll, which stared up with lifeless porcelain eyes. He pressed his forehead to hers, choking on grief. I can't lose you twice. I can't. Alem's voice cut through. Yusef. Yusef looked up, wild with pain. She is not your daughter, Alem said softly. She is the shadow of your love, twisted into a trap. If you stay, you will not hold her. You will become shadow beside her. And Salma, your real Salma, will fade even from memory. Yusef shook his head, clutching her tighter. No, don't take her from me again. The mist child's eyes burned brighter, her sweet smile turning sharp. Stay, she urged. Stay, forever. Alim stepped closer, his voice dropped low, heavy with compassion. Yusef, love is not possession, it is memory. Salma lives in you because you carry her. If you let this dream consume you, you will lose her truly. Yusef trembled violently. His sobs racked his chest. Slowly, painfully, his arms loosened. The child of mist pulled back, her form flickering. Baba, she whispered one last time, before dissolving into smoke. Yusef collapsed to the floor, broken, but free. Alim's own trial, the younger Alim loomed closer, his staff blazing with fire. You are a coward, he snarled. You chose silence, and you will lead these travelers into ruin. Take my hand. Claim power. Be what you are destined to be. The elder Alim's staff shook in his grip. His breath came heavy. For years, he had carried silence, half by choice, half by shame. The vision's words cut deep, too deep. His younger self raised his staff higher, the glow nearly blinding. Choose, rule the desert, or fade like dust. For a long, agonizing moment Alim wavered. His knees bent under the weight of the choice. His companions watched, silent, afraid. Then, with a roar of defiance, he lifted his staff and struck it down again. The glow of his younger self shattered, splintering into shards of golden sand that scattered like sparks in the wind. Alim sank to one knee, exhausted, but his eyes blazed with newfound strength. I am not ruler, he whispered. I am guide. And that is enough. The breaking of the dream, the mist passengers wailed, their voices twisting into a storm of cries. Their glowing eyes flickered violently. The carriage shook its walls, bending and folding, as though the dream itself were collapsing. No, they hissed. Stay, you were ours. But the travelers clung to each other, Karim clutching Layla's sleeve, Layla holding her journal, Yusef gripping his chest, and Alim standing tall with his staff. The floor rippled one last time, then cracked. The mist passengers shattered into smoke, their whispers fading into nothingness. The ocean outside dissolved, waves collapsing into sand. The silver moon shrank, flickered, and vanished. And just like that, they were back inside the carriage. Velvet seats, brass lamps, desert night stretching outside the windows. Silence after the storm. For a long time, none of them spoke. Their breaths came ragged, hearts pounding, sweat slicked their brows, tears lined their cheeks. Finally, Karim whispered, it felt so real. Layla nodded weakly. It was real, just not the kind of real we can live in. Yusef sat heavily, his eyes hollow, but something new glimmered within them. Not joy, not peace, but the beginning of acceptance. Alim leaned on his staff, his body weary but his spirit steady. Dreams tempt us with what we desire most, but to live in them is to die in truth. Karim curled against Layla's arm, his small voice soft. I don't want to die in dreams. Layla brushed his hair gently. None of us will. Not while we're together. The train hummed softly, as if in agreement. The silver lanterns flickered back to life, calmer, gentler. Closing of the trial. The desert outside stretched endlessly, stars glittering above. The train carried them onward, its wheels gliding silently over unseen tracks. But within the carriage, something had changed. The four of them had faced the sweet poison of dreams and chosen life. They sat in silence, hearts heavy, but bound by the unspoken truth. They were no longer strangers. They were companions, and the desert was not done with them yet. The halt in the desert. The night stretched endlessly outside the train, stars shimmering like silver coins tossed into black water. The hum of the wheels slowed, softened, and finally fell silent. Kareem stirred awake first, rubbing his eyes. Are we stopping? Layla straightened, blinking in disbelief. There is no station here, nothing but sand. And yet, when the mist cleared from the windows, something remarkable revealed itself. A vast market, glowing with golden lanterns, sprawled across the dunes. Stalls lined with silks and jewels shimmered beneath the starlight. Merchants in strange robes called out in languages half familiar, half forgotten. Exotic animals slumbered in cages of bone. Perfumes drifted, heavy with spices none of them recognized. The air pulsed with life, though no road led here, no city was near. Alim's voice rumbled low, the market of echoes. The first step outside the carriage doors creaked open. Warm desert air rushed in, tinged with cinnamon, smoke, and something faintly metallic. Kareem stepped down first, wide-eyed. His small hands tugged Layla's sleeve. It's like a dream. Alim followed slowly, staff tapping the sand. His expression was grim, though his eyes flickered with recognition. This place, he murmured. It was whispered of in my youth. A market that appears only to travelers caught between waking and dreaming. They say everything here can be bought for a price. Yusuf's voice was hoarse. And what kind of price is that? Alim looked at him gravely. The kind no coin can cover. The market breathes. The four of them walked among the stalls at once. Voices rose around them, 100 traders, 1,000 whispers. Come boy, one called, shaking a jar that glowed faintly. Inside bottled starlight, one sip, and you'll never fear the dark again, scholar. Another hissed at Layla, holding up a scroll sealed with blood-red wax. Here lies the forgotten history of kings erased from stone. Take it, and your name will shine brighter than theirs, warrior. A third cried to Yusuf, though he had not spoken of battles. Here is a blade that never misses its mark. With it, no man can defeat you, no fate can deny you. Even Alim was not spared. A veiled figure bowed low, offering a staff carved from bone and crowned with a glowing crystal. Elder, take this. With it, the desert itself will kneel before your command. Each word pulled at them. Each promise struck deep. The bazaar of wonders. The stalls grew stranger as they walked deeper. One merchant sold mirrors that did not reflect faces, but memories. Kareem leaned forward and gasped as he saw himself as a baby in his mother's arms. Then older, running through the streets of his village. Another stall displayed cages, not of animals, but of voices, tiny glowing orbs, humming with laughter, screams, lullabies. The merchant whispered, choose a voice, and it will sing to you forever. A woman sold shadows stitched like cloaks. Where one, she purred, and walk unseen, even from fate itself. The scents grew thicker, the sounds stranger. And yet, beneath the beauty, there was something unsettling. Every trader's eyes glowed faintly, just like the mist passengers from the dream. Karim's temptation. Karim was drawn to a stall where toys dangled from threads of silver, wooden horses pranced, glass birds flapped their wings, and in the center sat a goat carved from crystal, its eyes golden. Karim's breath caught, his hands reached out, trembling. The merchant leaned forward, his voice oily smooth. For you, boy, take it, the goat you lost, the goat you love. It will never run again. It will never leave you. Kareem whispered, What do I give you? The merchant's smile widened, teeth too sharp. Only your laughter. Give me every laugh you will ever have, and the goat is yours. Kareem froze. His scarf felt suddenly heavy around his neck. The thought of never laughing again, of never sharing joy with Layla or Alim, made his chest ache. But oh, how badly he wanted the goat. Layla's feet stopped before a stall draped in black velvet. A man with silver eyes unrolled the scroll that seemed to glow from within. Here, he whispered, the truth the world has hidden, the missing dynasties, the forbidden myths, the answers to every question your ink has ever longed to write. The scroll pulsed with golden light, each line shimmering with secrets untold. Layla's breath hitched, her fingers hovered. And the price? She asked, though she feared the answer. The man's smile curved. Your silence, forever. You may hold the truth, but never speak it aloud. Never write it. Never share it. Only carry it. Locked inside, Layla shivered. The thought of knowing everything, yet never being able to tell anyone. It was both intoxicating and terrifying. Yusef's blade Yusef lingered at a weapons stall. The merchant, tall and gaunt, held up a sword so sharp it hummed in the air. Its blade gleamed with a cold blue light. This blade, the merchant said, will strike down any who stand before you. It will never miss, never break, never falter. With it, you can cut through grief itself. Yusef's eyes burned. He gripped the hilt, feeling its perfect balance, its deadly promise. And the price. The merchant's eyes narrowed. Your forgiveness, every ounce. You will never forgive again. Not others, not yourself. Only vengeance, sharp as steel, will remain. The sword weighed heavy in his hand, though its edge was light. His heart thundered with longing, rage, and dread. Alim's, the farthest edge of the market, Alim faced the veiled figure again. The staff of bone glowed faintly, its crystal humming with power. With this, the figure whispered, you will not guide, you will rule. The sands, the winds, the very stars will bow to your will. No riddle will bind you, no silence will shame you. Take it, and be master of the desert. Alim's hand trembled. For years, he had carried only his wooden staff, worn and splintered by time. To hold power again, to command instead of wander. The thought gnawed at his heart. And the price? He asked softly. The figure leaned close. Your humility. Once gone, you will never kneel again. Not to God, not to man, not even to truth. Alem's breath came ragged, his grip tightened on his old staff. Closing of this section, the market glowed brighter, hotter, as though waiting. The merchants leaned forward in unison, their voices rising together like a spell. Choose, choose, choose. The four travelers stood apart, each staring at their temptation. The goat, the scroll, the blade, the staff. That each promise glittered, each price whispered like a blade at the throat. The desert wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of the train's whistle, distant, urgent, like a warning. The market of echoes held its breath, and the travelers trembled on the edge of choice. The bazaar's pressure, the market swelled around them, glowing hotter with every breath. Lanterns flared like fire, perfumes thickened into choking clouds. Voices multiplied until every word pressed into their skulls. Choose, choose, choose. The merchant's eyes gleamed brighter, and their offers grew sharper. The goat nudged Karim's arm, bleating softly as though begging him to stay. The queen's fiery crown burned brighter in Layla's vision. The sword in Yusef's grip hummed with unbearable power, and Alam's younger self loomed taller behind the staff of bone, his presence suffocating. The market was alive. It was not just a place, it was a hunger. Karim's small fists clutched the crystal goat, his breath trembled, his lips quivered. I want him back, he whispered, his voice cracked, almost breaking. I'm so tired of losing things. The merchant leaned close, his teeth sharp, then laughed no more. Trade joy for certainty, trade laughter for your goat. Karim squeezed his eyes shut. In his memory, he heard Layla's gentle chuckle, Yusef's rare gruff laughter, even Alam's quiet hum of amusement. Without laughter, those bonds would wither. But oh, how badly he wanted to hold the goat forever. His chest ached with longing. Layla knelt beside him, her eyes soft. Karim, she whispered, if you lose your laughter, you lose us. What good is your goat if you cannot smile when he bleats, or laugh when he runs? Karim's lip trembled harder. The goat bleated again, but slowly, his hands loosened. The crystal figure slipped from his fingers and shattered into sand. The merchant hissed, recoiling. Foolish boy. Karim wept openly, but Layla held him close. You chose life, not shadow, she whispered. Layla's trial the scroll, glowed hotter, brighter. The man with silver eyes hissed in her ear. Think, scholar. Every story you've ever longed to know, every answer denied to you, all of it, in your hands. Never again mocked, never again doubted. The truths of the desert, of kings of gods. Layla's hands shook violently. The hunger in her chest screamed louder than the market itself. She had dedicated her life to writing, to seeking, to chasing what others refused to see. How could she walk away now? But then she heard Karim's sniffles, saw his small arms clinging to her, his laughter still alive. She looked to Yusuf, his grief worn but honest. To Alim, his silence heavy but wise. She chose silence. She would betray them. She would know truths but never share them. And what was knowledge, if it could not be spoken, shared, lived? Her hand tore back with a cry. The scroll burst into flame, curling into ash that scattered across the sand. The silver-eyed man shrieked, his face warping into smoke. "You will regret this, scribe." But Layla only clutched her journal tighter, her tears soaking its pages. Yusuf's rage, the blade burned cold in Yusuf's hands. Its edge gleamed like moonlight, its hum thrummed in his bones. He saw enemies falling before it, saw grief cut away, saw Salma's sickness struck down as if death itself could be carved apart. The merchant's voice was a hiss in his ear. "With this, you will never lose again. No one will hurt you. No one will take from you. Only vengeance. Only victory." Yusuf's chest heaved. His eyes glistened with tears. He could almost see himself wielding it, invincible, untouchable. But then the price echoed. No forgiveness. Not for anyone. Not even yourself. The thought chilled him. His daughter's face flickered in memory, soft and kind. Her laughter had always been forgiveness. Her smile a mercy he never deserved. If he lost forgiveness, he would lose her truly. With a roar, Yusuf hurled the blade into the sand. It screamed like a living thing before dissolving into dust. The gaunt merchant snarled, his eyes blazing. "Weakling, you chose loss again." But Yusuf, though trembling, felt lighter. His chest still ached, but the weight was no longer poison. Alim's confrontation, the veiled figure stepped closer, the bone staff glowing hotter. His younger self's shadow loomed, taller, sharper, burning with arrogance. "Take it," they urged together. "Rule, command. No longer beg for answers, no longer doubt. Seize your destiny." Alim's knees shook. His old staff felt weakened, his hands splintered and small compared to the power offered. He remembered his youth, the strength he had once wielded, the respect he had lost. For a moment, he longed for it. But then he looked at his companions, Karim's innocence preserved, Layla's courage, Yusuf's painful but honest choice. If he took the staff, he would no longer guide, he would dominate, and that was not wisdom, it was ruin. He struck his old staff to the ground. "I need no crown. I need no throne. The desert is not mine to rule. I walk with it, or I do not walk at all." The veiled figure hissed. The younger shadows snarled and cracked apart, splintering into shards of bone that dissolved into dust. The bone staff fell, brittle, lifeless. The markets collapsed, the air in the bazaar turned furious. Lanterns shattered, perfumes curdled into smoke. The merchants shrieked, their glowing eyes burning white. "You refuse us. You reject the gifts of eternity. Then you will starve in the desert. You will die forgotten." The stalls trembled, silks unraveled into sand, jewels cracked into shards of glass, voices shattered like cages breaking. The market itself collapsed inward, folding and twisting like a mirage fading. The four travelers clung to each other, shielding their faces from the storm of smoke and ash. And then silence. Returned to the train when they opened their eyes. They were back on the train. The hum of the wheels returned. The lamps glowed soft. The desert stretched outside, endless and quiet. Karim sniffled, his eyes swollen, but he was safe. Layla's journal rested heavy in her lap. Yusuf leaned back, exhausted but breathing. Alim sat tall, his staff steady in his hands. The market of echoes was gone, if it had ever been there at all. For a long while, none of them spoke. The air inside the carriage felt sacred, fragile. Finally, Alim broke the silence. "Temptation does not vanish when rejected. It waits, it tests again, but you each chose life. Remember this night, remember what you refused, for it may return in other shapes." The train carried them deeper into the desert, its song gentler now, like the sigh of wind through endless dunes. The desert silenced, the train rolled forward, its wheels humming low against invisible tracks. Outside, dunes stretched endlessly, silver under the cold moonlight. The market of echoes was gone, as though it had never existed. No lanterns, no stalls, no voices, only sand. Inside the carriage, silence reigned. Each of the four travelers sat apart, lost in the weight of what they had just rejected. Karim stared down at his hands, remembering the crystal goat. His small fingers twitched as if they still clutched it. His chest ached with both pride and sorrow. Layla's journal rested heavy on her lap. She traced its edges with trembling fingers, remembering the glowing scroll. The hunger in her chest had not died, it only ached deeper, louder. Yusef leaned against the window, his reflection dark and hollow. His hands trembled faintly, remembering the sword's cold hum. His jaw tightened, still haunted by the thought of what he might have cut away. Alim sat in stillness, eyes closed, staff across his knees. The echo of his younger self's voice still hissed in his ears. He was not untouched by the trial. None of them were. The desert outside was silent, but within each traveler, storms still raged. Karim's question at last. It was Karim who spoke, his small voice, fragile but clear. Why? Why do they try to trick us? He looked around, at the others, his eyes wide, shimmering with unshed tears. Why does the desert make us see what we want most, only to take it away? The question hung in the air, heavy as stone. Alim opened his eyes slowly. Because the desert does not give, it tests, it strips. It shows us the hunger we bury, the wounds we carry, and then it asks, will you be ruled by them, or will you walk free? Karim frowned, small brows furrowed. But it hurts. Yes, Alim said softly. The truth always does. Layla's reflection. Layla spoke next, her voice raw. When I saw that scroll, I thought I would never be able to let it go. All my life, I've been chasing truths buried in silence. To know everything, even if I could never speak it, that temptation was unbearable. She shut her journal, hard, as if the sound might silence her longing. Yusef looked at her, his tired eyes soft. And yet you walked away. Her lips quivered. Only because I saw Karim. She looked down at the boy leaning against her. Because I thought, what is the use of knowledge, if it kills the laughter beside me? If it locks me in silence, while the world goes on? Karim smiled weakly at her words, though his eyes still glistened. Alim nodded approvingly. Wisdom is not the hunger for truth. It is knowing when to let truth pass. Layla pressed her hands tighter against her journal. The ache in her heart did not ease, but she understood. Yusef's confession. The silence lingered again, until Yusef broke it, his voice heavy, rough. The blade, he muttered. His eyes stayed fixed on the window, watching dunes slip past. For a moment, I thought I could cut away my grief, strike down death itself, bring Salma back. His breath hitched, chest trembling. But the price? He clenched his fists. No forgiveness. Ever. Not for others. Not for myself. He finally turned, meeting their gazes. Do you know what that would mean? Every face I saw after hers, every word spoken to me, all I would feel is anger. I would rot from the inside. Karim crawled closer and touched his arm gently. Salma wouldn't want that. Yusef's throat tightened, tears sliding down his cheeks. He nodded faintly. No, she wouldn't. The carriage hummed softly around them, like a lullaby, carrying his grief into silence. Alim's truth finally. Layla whispered the question that had been lingering in all their minds. And you, Alim, what did you see? The old guide's eyes dimmed, shadows of pain crossing his weathered face. He tapped his staff against the floor, his hand shaking faintly. I saw myself, he said quietly. Younger, stronger, a man who did not doubt, did not kneel, did not fall silent. His voice trembled, and for a moment, I wanted him back. I wanted power again, to lead not as a guide, but as a master. Karim's eyes widened. But you didn't take it. Alim shook his head, a tired smile ghosting his lips. No, because power without humility is poison, and I would rather wander humbly through the sands than rule them as a tyrant. He leaned back, sighing. But the temptation, it lingers, it always will. Trust Forjda fell silent again, but this time it was a softer silence. The storm inside them had not vanished, but it had shifted. They had bared their wounds to one another, shared their weaknesses, and in that sharing, something new was born. Trust. Karim leaned against Layla's shoulder, clutching her journal for comfort. Yusef closed his eyes, letting his grief rest quietly instead of roaring. Alim's grip on his staff steadied, stronger than before. For the first time since the journey began, they felt less like strangers and more like companions bound by something deeper than the train itself. The market of echoes had not broken them. It had forged them. the desert's song as the train carried them deeper into the night. The desert outside seemed to shift. The dunes glistened brighter, as though the stars themselves had bent lower to listen. A faint melody hummed through the wind, not words, but a rhythm, soft and soothing. Karim's eyes fluttered closed, his breathing evening into sleep. Layla's pen scratched faintly against paper as she recorded the night's trial. Her words, softer, steadier. Yusef's hand rested over his chest, his grief still present but not crushing. And Olem sat tall, gazing out at the stars, whispering a prayer under his breath. The desert did not answer, but perhaps it listened, the whisper of what's ahead, as the lamps dimmed, as the carriage rocked gently, as exhaustion claimed them one by one. A faint whistle echoed through the night, not the train's whistle, but another, distant, hollow, almost like an echo. Olem's eyes opened sharply. He leaned forward, listening. The sound drifted again, then faded. The desert was never still for long, and the journey was far from over. After the bazaar, the train swayed gently as it pushed forward into the night. The echo of the false markets still lingered in their minds, not just the voices, not just the visions, but the feeling of how close each of them had come to surrendering. The desert beyond the window looked calm, endless dunes bathed in starlight, but they all knew the truth. The desert was never calm. Its silence was simply another mask. Yusef broke that silence first, his voice low but steady. "We survived it," he said. "But I wonder, will we survive the next thing?" Alim, leaning on his staff, answered slowly. "Survival is not the true test. The desert does not care if we live or die. What matters is whether we remain ourselves when it is done." Layla closed her journal, her eyes shadowed but resolute. "And if we lose ourselves," Alim looked at her, his gaze heavy, "then even life will be no victory." A bond strengthened. Karim shifted uneasily, tugging at Layla's sleeve. "I almost gave away my laughter," he whispered. "If I had, would you still like me?" Layla bent down, brushing his hair gently back from his forehead. "Karim, we don't stay with each other because of what we own, or even what we can give. We stay because of who we are, even when we are broken. I would never stop caring for you." The boy sniffled and leaned against her. "I was scared." Yusef's deep voice softened unexpectedly. "So were we. Every one of us. Fear doesn't make you weak, Karim. Giving in to it does. And you didn't." Karim's eyes widened, surprised at the kindness in Yusef's tone. Slowly, a small, tired smile broke across his face. Alim nodded approvingly. "This bond, this trust, it is stronger than any staff, scroll, or blade. Remember it, for the desert will try again to tear it apart." Lessons of the market. Lila, still thoughtful, asked, "Why did the market come at all? Was it a trap, like the missed passengers? Or was it a part of us?" Alim tapped his staff gently on the floor. "Both. The desert reflects. It does not create from nothing. The market of echoes is called so because it only shows what is already inside us. Echoes of our deepest hunger." He paused, eyes distant. "It is not an enemy you can strike. It is a mirror you must choose to shatter." Yusef muttered, "Then why does it feel like it will come back? Like I will see that blade again?" "Because grief does not vanish when resisted," Alim said gravely. "It waits, it whispers. The blade was only its shape tonight. Tomorrow, it may wear another." The words settled into them like heavy stones, sobering and undeniable. A flicker of trust tires passed in the quiet rocking of the train. The stars outside wheeled slowly across the sky. At times, Karim dozed off against Layla, his breaths soft and even. Yusef sat rigid, though now and then his eyes softened when he glanced at the boy's sleeping form. Layla scribbled quietly in her journal, her words less frantic, more thoughtful. Alim hummed softly under his breath, an old tune that sounded like desert wind rushing through forgotten canyons. It filled the carriage with a peace none of them expected. For the first time, it felt less like for strangers trapped on a mysterious train, and more like four companions walking the same path, carrying each other's burdens. The desert's warning but peace never lingered long in the desert. The stars outside began to flicker, dimming unnaturally. The air grew thick, as though the train had entered an unseen fog. A hollow sound echoed faintly, not the whistle this time, but something like drums in the distance. Karim stirred in his sleep, frowning. Layla's pen stilled mid-word. Yusef sat straighter, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he no longer carried. Alam's eyes narrowed. "The desert shifts again," The sound of the drums grew louder, like thunder rolling beneath the dunes. Shadows rippled across the sand, moving against the wind. Yusef muttered, "We should not have asked for quiet. The desert does not give it freely." The conversation in shadows before the danger could fully form. Alim spoke firmly, "Do not fear the shadows yet. Fear divides, trust binds." He looked at each of them in turn. "Tell me, what will you hold on to when the desert tests you again? What will keep you from breaking?" Karim thought hard, then whispered, "I'll hold on to Layla's stories, because when she tells them, the desert feels less empty." Layla blinked, her lips parting softly. Then she smiled through her tears. "I'll hold on to laughter," Layla answered in return, "because it saved Karim, and maybe it will save me, too." Yusef hesitated the longest. His eyes flickered with pain before he finally said, "I will hold on to memory, not as a weapon, not as something to cut, but as something to carry." Alim bowed his head, "And I will hold on to humility, even if I stumble, even if I fail. I will kneel to truth. That is how I will not be lost." The air seemed to shift, as though their vows themselves carved strength into the night. The drums faded, the shadows slunk back into the dunes, the stars shone clearer again. The desert had listened, and, for now, it had passed them by. Closing of Part 4, the train rolled on, steady as a heartbeat. The travelers breathed easier, though they knew the desert had not finished with them. Karim curled back into sleep, safe in the warmth of his companions. Layla finally rested her pen, her journal closed with care. Yusef leaned back, his grief still deep but no longer alone, and Alim's staff tapped gently in rhythm with the train, a steady reminder of the humility he had chosen. The market of echoes had shown them what they might lose, but it had also shown them what they could never give up: each other. And so, as the train cut deeper into the endless desert, the silence was no longer empty. It was filled with trust. The gathering storm, the desert had been still for too long, too quiet, too forgiving. By the time the sun began its slow climb over the dunes, the sky above looked heavy, darkened by veils of rolling clouds. The air thickened with the scent of dust and the faint taste of iron. Karim pressed his small hands against the window. "The sand is moving," he whispered. He was right. Outside, the dunes writhed like waves upon a restless sea. Shadows bent across the horizon, twisting in unnatural shapes. The desert no longer looked endless, it looked alive. Layla clutched her journal tighter, her words forgotten mid-sentence. Yusef narrowed his eyes, hand clenched into a fist. Alim's staff tapped once against the floor, his voice calm but grave. "The storm comes," Alim said, "and storms in the desert are not made only of wind and sand. They are made of memory, they are made of fear." When the train slows, the train, which had been so steady, so relentless in its forward march, began to falter. The wheels groaned, grinding against invisible tracks. The lanterns flickered. "Why are we slowing?" Layla whispered. Alim closed his eyes. "Because the desert wishes us to walk." Sure enough, the train shuddered, hissed, and rolled to a stop in the middle of the dune field. The silence that followed was immense, broken only by the far-off growl of the storm. Yusef rose to his feet. "So this is it. The desert doesn't want passengers anymore. It wants us on the sand." Alim nodded. "We must face it on our own feet." With hesitation heavy in their hearts, the four travelers stepped down from the carriage. Their boots sank into the soft sand. Behind them, the train shimmered faintly, its shape already blurring, as though retreating back into dream. The wall of sand ahead, the storm approached. A wall of golden sand, taller than mountains, rolled forward with terrifying speed. The sky above roared, lightning cracking within the swirling dust. Karim clung to Layla's hand, his voice shaking. "It'll swallow us." Yusef bent low, shielding the boy with his broad frame. "Not if we hold together." Alim raised his staff high. "Do not run, do not scatter. A storm is not beaten with strength, it is endured with patience." The wall of sand roared closer, a tidal wave of earth, and then, in a deafening instant, it struck. Inside the storm, the world vanished into chaos. Sand tore at their faces, their clothes, their skin. The wind howled like 1,000 voices screaming. At once, the air thickened until each breath burned. They clung to one another. Karim clutched Layla's arm. Layla clung to Yusef, Yusef's hand anchored on Alim's shoulder. Their chain was the only thing keeping them from being torn apart. Yet within the storm, shapes moved. Karim gasped through the grit. "Do you see them?" Figures walked within the whirling dust, shadows of the market of echoes, merchants with glowing eyes, holding out temptations once more. The goat, the scroll, the blade, the staff, all drifted just out of reach, shimmering with cruel beauty. Layla squeezed her eyes shut. They're not real, they're echoes. Alam's voice thundered against the wind. Do not grasp what is offered. The storm feeds on your hunger. The breaking point, but the storm was merciless. Kareem stumbled, coughing hard. Layla pulled him close, shielding his face with her scarf. Yusef's knees buckled, his grief roaring like the sandstorm itself. I can't, he gasped. I can't carry it anymore. Alim turned, gripping his arm fiercely. You can, because you are not alone. Yusef's chest heaved, his tears cutting lines through the sand on his face. And then, for the first time, he let himself lean on Olim's strength instead of bearing it alone. The chain held, the storm raged, and slowly, painfully, the wind began to ease. The eye of the storm suddenly, silence fell. The storm opened into a vast hollow, an eye of calm at its center. Here, the air was clear, the sand still, the stars above shockingly visible. The four travelers collapsed into the quiet, gasping, their bodies battered but whole. Kareem whispered, "Did we survive?" Alim lifted his head, his voice weak but firm. Not yet, love. At the center of the hollow stood a figure, cloaked in flowing sand. Its face was hidden, but its presence pressed heavy on their hearts. It was neither merchant nor shadow. It was something older. The storm itself had taken form. The desert's voice. The figure raised a hand. Its voice was not one sound but many, whisper and roar, child and elder, laugh and wail. You have walked my sands. You have faced my echoes. You have rejected what you crave, but you cannot leave unless you answer. Kareem clutched Layla's sleeve. Answer what? The figure's voice rippled like thunder. What is stronger, hunger, or the refusal of it? What endures, power, or humility? What is worth more, life alone, or life shared? Its questions struck their hearts like arrows. Alim pushed himself to his feet. His voice, though weary, carried firm. The desert feeds on hunger, but hunger is endless. It devours itself. What endures is not hunger, it is trust, it is companionship, it is humility. The figure's head tilted, sand swirling faster around its form. And you believe this will save you? Alim lifted his staff. I do not only believe, I know. The final test. The figure raised both arms. Around them, the storm began to collapse inward, rushing to swallow them whole. Kareem cried out. Layla shielded him. Yusef braced himself, and Alam stood tall. But then, one by one, they reached for each other. Kareem's hand held Layla's. Layla's hand clasped Yusef's. Yusef's hand gripped Olam's staff. Their chain became unbreakable. The storm struck and shattered. The figure dissolved into light. The hollow exploded into silence, and suddenly, there was no desert, only stars. The journey's end, they stood together on solid ground once more, but not on sand. The train waited quietly before them, its lamps glowing warm, its carriages open. Without speaking, they stepped inside. The seats felt softer, the lamps brighter, the hum of the wheels steadier. Kareem leaned against Layla, already drifting into exhausted sleep. Yusef rested his head back, his face wet with quiet tears, but this time, not of despair. Layla opened her journal and, with a steady hand, wrote a single line. In the desert, we found ourselves. And Alim, closing his eyes, whispered one last prayer. The desert tests, but it also teaches, and tonight, it has let us pass. The train pulled forward, carrying them into the unknown, its whistle echoing softly into the endless night. Not a sound of fear, not of hunger, but of peace. The return to the train. For travelers, Alim, Yusef, Layla and Kareem stepped back into the train with steps that felt heavier than before, but steadier too. The storm had left marks on them, not on their skin, but deep inside. Each had faced a part of themselves, and each had chosen not to surrender. The train welcomed them silently. Its lamps glowed warm, as though relieved to see them return. The seats felt softer than ever, the windows clearer. For the first time since their journey began, the carriage no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a companion. Kareem curled into his seat beside Layla, his eyes already half closed. We made it, he murmured sleepily. The storm, it didn't win. No, Layla whispered, brushing his hair back gently. It didn't. Yusef leaned back with a long, trembling sigh. And yet, it feels as though it still lingers in me, like the sand never truly leaves. Alim placed a steadying hand on his arm. The desert never leaves anyone, Yusuf. It becomes a part of us, but so does the strength we found there. The train began to move again, its whistle softer now, almost like a lullaby. The endless night hours stretched as the train rolled forward, carrying them deeper into the unknown. Outside the windows, the dunes shimmered, then softened, until the desert itself seemed to change. The sky widened, stars burning brighter than ever. Their light reflected on the sands until it looked as though they were traveling across an ocean made of silver waves. The horizon glowed faintly, not with the harshness of dawn, but with the gentle shimmer of dreams. Layla's pen moved across her journal slowly, her words no longer frantic but calm. She did not write about loss or temptation this time. She wrote about trust, about the way they had held each other through the storm. Kareem stirred beside her. "What are you writing?" "A memory," she said softly. "So that when the desert tries to steal it from us, we'll have it safe here." The boy smiled faintly and drifted back into sleep, his small breaths sinking with the rhythm of the train. Yusuf sat staring out the window, the stars reflected in his dark eyes. His jaw was set, but his body seemed lighter than it had in days. "Salma," he whispered under his breath, so faintly it was almost lost to the hum of the wheels. "I carried you through fire, through grief, through shadows, and now I let you rest." His fingers unclenched. The pain of her absence did not vanish. It never would, but it no longer roared like the storm. It had softened, like sand, after rain, becoming something he could walk upon instead of sink into. Alim watched him quietly, nodding in silent respect. Some burdens were never meant to vanish, only to be carried with dignity. Alim's reflection, Alim too, felt the change within himself. His younger shadow, so arrogant and hungry for power, no longer haunted his vision. It had not disappeared. He could still feel the echo of that old self, but it no longer ruled him. He leaned on his staff, whispering into the stillness. "The desert humbles, but it also teaches. I came as a guide. Tonight I leave as a student." The train hummed in agreement, as though it too had heard his prayer. The shifting landscape gradually, the desert outside began to change. The endless dunes softened, giving way to valleys lit with faint green. Strange flowers bloomed in clusters, glowing faintly under the starlight. Streams of silver water trickled through the sand, carving small rivers that sparkled like threads of moonlight. Karim's eyes widened as he woke and pressed against the glass. "Look, the desert is alive," Layla gasped softly. "The Valley of Dreams," she whispered, recalling a half-forgotten legend. It was said to exist beyond the storms, a place where the desert finally rests. The train slowed, its hum fading until it came to a gentle stop. The door slid open, as if inviting them to step out. The Valley of Dreams. They descended carefully, boots pressing into soft earth instead of sand. The air was cool, scented with blossoms and water. Fireflies drifted lazily around them, their glow reflecting in Karim's wide eyes. The valley stretched wide, cradled between silent dunes. Here, the desert seemed to breathe not in storms, but in sighs. Pools of water mirrored the stars, and reeds swayed in a wind that carried no dust, only peace. Yusuf sank to his knees by one of the pools, cupping the water in his hands. He drank, and for the first time in years, his face softened into something like peace. Layla knelt beside him, filling a small vial from the pool. "So that we never forget this place," she said. Alim stood tall, gazing across the valley. His staff trembled faintly in his grip, not from weakness but from awe. "Few are allowed to see this," he whispered. "Fewer still survive to tell it." A gentle farewell. They spent hours in the valley, though time felt strange here, as though it slowed and stretched. Karim ran among the glowing flowers, laughter spilling freely from him, no longer shadowed by loss. Layla recorded everything, her journal heavy with both words and sketches. Yusuf sat in quiet meditation, his grief at last tempered by peace, and Alim, the guide, simply watched them all with quiet pride. At last, the train's whistle sounded again, soft, distant, like the sigh of wind through reeds. "It's time," Alim said gently. Karim pouted, reluctant to leave. "But it's so beautiful here." "It will always be here," Alim assured him. "And now, it will always be in you, too." Reluctantly, they returned to the train. The valley shimmered as they boarded, as though it was already fading into dream. The final ride. The train moved once more, carrying them away from the valley. None of them spoke, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything had already been said. Karim slept peacefully, a faint smile on his lips. Layla closed her journal and held it close, her eyes finally at rest. Yusuf sat with his arms folded, his breathing deep and calm, no longer haunted, and Alim leaned back with his staff across his lap, eyes closed in silent gratitude. The lamps dimmed, the wheels hummed like a lullaby. Outside, the desert stretched endless, eternal, but it no longer looked threatening. It looked timeless, like a guardian watching over them. The last whisper as the night deepened. The train gave one final whistle, soft, long, fading into silence. It did not sound like departure, nor like warning. It sounded like a farewell. The travelers, each in their own way, let their eyes close. Dreams welcomed them, not as echoes of hunger, but as gentle promises of rest. The desert, too, seemed to rest, its storms quiet, its echoes silenced. Only stars remained, watching in silence as the train disappeared into eternity.